Hello. Welcome to the Xirtus.
And we're back. Amazing. Can I ask you guys a question, like kind of a personal question? Would you ever eat genetically modified Mastodon meatballs?
100%.
How long would it
I just
take?
made that post.
That's actually where we're going with this. Good job.
Is
Eddie.
the Mastodon like ancient, or is it? Oh, it is. It's ancient
Aurora-
Mastodon. It's not like
Aurora-
did we bring them back? If this is theoretical, are we bringing them back like Jurassic Park and then deciding if we should eat
I like this better. I think we're skipping Mastodon and going straight to meatball. It's like beyond Mastodon, as far as I can tell. But they're
got to be a
growing.
limited run.
Well, no, I mean they just.
No, I haven't even tried like modern elephant. If I tried something that's 14,000 years old, before
I mean,
fresh.
I've had
elephant.
Velveeta cheese before, which I'm sure is way worse for you than whatever the hell this Mastodon meat would
Are you
be.
comparing elephant to Mastodon? No, you're saying the meatball. All right. I get your point. Well, I think the meatball idea is interesting just because if you're starting to, what is it? They're resurrecting flesh from a lost species to demonstrate the potential of meat grown from cells. So what you do is you start with the cell and you start to reproduce the cell. You know, they're taking frozen tissue. I imagine that they have to be modifying other tissue to have the same qualities as the Mastodon tissue, because likely is dead, right? 10,000 years at least.
Well, in the article, they
Oh,
mentioned
yeah.
they had to use elephant DNA to kind of fill in the gaps. And then originally they were trying to produce dodo meat, but they didn't have any of the DNA to fill in those gaps.
Yeah,
I wonder if it's like ostrich.
Dodo meat's gotta taste like terrific. And how did this go
Right.
extinct in just a few years? It's
Well,
gotta-
the same thing with the
tastes
Mastodon.
more
Like,
like chicken.
like humans made the Mastodon go extinct because of over hunting, essentially. So the premise is
Propaganda.
that maybe it's like the tastiest meat we've ever had. Another interesting thing from this article was that even though they can make the Mastodon meat, we're not sure if the human body can actually properly digest it at this point. So like it's actually a little bit cautious. Like they probably need some guinea pigs to, be the
You
first
get-
ones to eat this.
You
It's
get
interesting,
instant
though.
kidney stones.
When you look at the Western Hemisphere and Africa, for instance, camels originally came from North America and they crossed the bridge the other direction. So while, the mammoths were coming, the camels were going, which I think is pretty interesting. And also the same thing with ponies, right? I think ponies came originally from these dog-like things in the North America that ended up in going extinct in North America, but the ones that evolved into ponies in Mongolia, then into Arabian horses and etc. So we have this weird crisscross at this point. And the other thought I had was the Sahara, right? Because this has come up a lot recently. We look at the Sahara and how it's changing so quickly and it's about to come back and all that. But also the South American rainforest devastation very quickly. We're getting, I know I sound like a hippie here, but for real, like I was there. It's crazy. Every day, just hundreds of miles of it disappears until the point that there's like literally none left in most of it. And
I've
then
been
they
to
bring in,
Brazil.
yeah, right. Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy. But then talk to some Brazilians. You know what they think? They're like, it's great. Most Brazilians are stoked. They're like, get that rainforest out of our way. We
They
can
can
get
feed
bit by
themselves, you know?
snakes. Yeah, we're getting bit by
We
snakes.
could use some suburban sprawl here.
Seriously,
Yeah.
yeah. They
I
turned
mean, it'll
Amazonia
be
into a state. It's the state of Amazonia now. It's
it'll
basically
get
Georgia.
even worse now because because of Russia is about to dump U.S. The petrodollar, right? U.S. dollar basically is going to tank in very soon. I mean, now that a bunch of countries are joining in, including Saudi Arabia and Iran. But the thing is, it's the BRIC, right? BRIC, right? Brazil,
Right.
Russia,
Yellow Brick Road.
India. Yeah, so the Yellow Brick Road. Oh, you want to go straight into that? Okay, all right. So we're gonna get to that, right? So Brazil is gonna be a main focus. It's the biggest resource generator. I mean,
God.
Look at it. It's
So
got
brutal.
calcium. It's got lots of calcium for parrots. Look at that. They're eating mud.
But so
Yeah,
here's
the mud is edible there.
Here's my recent theory. Like the rainforest, they told me as a kid, right? Part of the reason that the Amazon River has the color it does. Let me see if I can show you the Amazon River Sahara color. I don't know if I can pull this up. There's like a theory that there's wind blown from Africa that's brought Sahara sands to the Amazon. And that's what's caused the Amazon to have so much of the same qualities as what we think were in the green Sahara that existed before. So it's almost as if this kind of breath of life came from Africa after it breathed, it expired into South America. Now, though, it seems like the opposite is happening. And we're actually having sand dunes and beaches from Brazil. And there's kind of this idea, what if this happened very quickly? What if the Sahara actually turned itself into the Sahara because we did this? What if we had animals and we had micro monocropping and the way we do today in Africa? Maybe these areas weren't just green, but we were agriculturally pulling the nitrogen out of the soil.
You know that there's a proven way to make this right. I saw one of the best TED Talks I've ever seen from a guy who was responsible for killing like more elephants than like anybody alive today.
Wow.
He made the call, I think in the 70s or something. He's this older guy, and it's about desertification. And the way that basically he makes an argument that we're treating cattle the wrong way. We're using cattle wrongly.
He shot 40,000 elephants? Jesus.
You know about this guy? So
that's
this
quite
is the
a
same
habit.
guy. I don't know, but yeah, there could be other people who are responsible for a lot of elephant deaths. But
Fair.
this guy basically figured out a way to change basically make new growth in places that have been completely. Oh, that's the guy. Yeah, that's him. Yeah.
Maniac.
So like, but what's crazy is like, yeah, he lives with this. He's like super fucking feels guilty about it, whatever the fuck. But he figured out how to strategically, seasonally, basically migrate cattle in order, like in such a way that you can basically bring new growth to these places, and he can demonstrate. It can show you the time frame of like looking at this place that was totally desert, and how it's just like
you know what,
filled with plant life later.
This
Get it
is nothing
now.
new though. This is exactly what those nomads do in Africa and in Central Asia.
But this explains why the elite want mastodons also. It's all tied together.
Totally.
Yeah, but in the Mongolians do the same thing. They migrate. They know the grass is going to have to grow back out. The African the tribe, they have those huge longhorn cows, whatever it's called. They do the same thing. They have to migrate, otherwise they'll deplete the whole. Yeah, so it's I don't think what he said was new. I mean, it's the only way.
You didn't have to kill 40,000 elephants to figure that out.
Yeah.
No, in fact, that was the thing, is that he could have used the elephants in the same way that you use the cattle, and that it was just completely backwards. And so it's like, it's trial and error, right? It's everything's troubleshooting. But he's, but it took somebody going through that, I think, to get the motivation to demonstrate how to fix it.
Yeah.
Hey, that's also, that saying that in order to make an omelet, you got to kill 40,000 elephants.
Yeah, right.
I can never flip that egg. Yeah, I mean, you know what? I think we should go back to that the elephant, the mammoth meatball, because I wasn't finishing with the thought that it happened because, well, those mastodons or mammoths, they died because of flash freeze. You know that, right? The ice age. It happened.
I had to think about a dodo bird omelet for a second, but I'm back. Okay.
Okay, but the Russians discovered these mammoths, mastodon, underneath the Siberian ice sheets,
Right.
because they were killed while they were walking, so it would happen instantly. And what I think people should pay attention to, last week, you noticed that half of the U.S., northern U.S., can see aurora, right? You can see northern lights.
Right.
That's never heard it, right? So I have a
Minnesota. I was out of Minnesota, so annoyed that I wasn't there while that's happening. I'm like, what?
Oh, yeah. but that's kind of scary, because it was really cold down here in Los Angeles, and I just thought that this feels like another Mastodon event. It feels like a flash-free polar shift kind of thing. The magnetic North Pole is moving. We know that, but it feels like it just jumped. The planet, we need to take measurement, and we need to see where the sun is at right now.
Right. Yeah, things are definitely feeling like that shift. And it's weird they show us those movies like Day After Tomorrow.
Yeah.
It starts with a storm, kind of a thing. A storm.
That's what Art Bell and Willie Schreiber said when they wrote the book, right? Well, the book, what was the book called that the movie's based on? What is it? The Next Century Megastorm? I don't know, but yeah, the book that they wrote together.
The book, Becoming Global Superstorm.
Yeah, that one. So they predicted that. I mean, we know the whole global warming narrative.
Dude, I did not realize that these two guys were behind this.
I had no idea Art Bell had anything to do with it. That's amazing. Well, that makes sense, actually. I mean, so.
What year did Art Bell die? Didn't he die like right after this or something? I mean,
he died in 2000. No, he died like maybe 5-6 years ago. No, maybe.
Oh my God! Really? I didn't realize.
He died 2018.
That was that recent. Jesus Christ! I can't tell time. Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
I think he was on his way down for a while. Sorry, I think Eddie was going to say that.
I think he was killed because there were gunshots outside his house in New Mexico.
Pretty odd.
Yeah, who knows?
It was probably for that one clip that Tool used at the end of Lateralis. That was.
At the beginning of. At the beginning of. Yeah, they end a Lateralis, but the song they used the clip where the guy's explaining he was being. Sorry, I'm getting too confused because there's an Art Bell clip about the Area 51 caller. And
that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
That's a good call, though.
Yeah, it's like they're here already, kind of thing. Yeah.
They're
some people have a photographic memory. But Frank's photographic memory is a lot more like the future TV and Back to the Future. He's watching like 6 shows at once, so he's like, "Oh yeah, there's this and that."
Is that a puppet or a real dog?
My new AI VTube model made in live 2D.
Oh, that's adorable. What's his name?
This is Zelda.
Zelda. Her name?
It's her name. Yeah.
Yeah. Didn't want to misgender your dog or canine American friend. I'm sorry.
So if you're scrolling, I just go back to the top. I think
the first thing I saw was War, Illusionism, Ice Age, Meatball, and then Ed Sheeran.
That's weird. I don't know how to explain that one. It's just a weird photo. William Ramsey.
Ed Sheeran's been weirdly on my mind because that movie about the guy who falls off a bike and he lands in a world where the Beatles don't exist.
Yeah. Yesterday.
And he has to teach Ed Sheeran the Beatles. You know what I mean?
That's right. Yeah, totally.
And I kept thinking I think about that a lot for some reason. I imagine what it would be like to be. It's kind of thing that I preoccupy my mind with. Like, what if that happened to me? You know what I mean? Like,
what was that movie with Martin Short where he goes back in time to like the medieval ages and then becomes like the first rapper? Or sorry, Martin Lawrence, not Martin Short.
Oh yeah.
Martin Lawrence, first rapper, Black Knight.
Martin Short would have been.
Well, but Black Knight.
It's literally called like the Black Knight. Yeah.
But you've seen the original, really. Black Knight's based on a Connecticut kid in King Arthur's Court with Bing Crosby, which is based on the book by Mark Twain, Samuel Clements, and also what they made the Disney movie. What they made that Disney movie out of, like the kid in the King Arthur's Court or whatnot. Have you seen that one?
Yeah.
This movie blows my mind because there's a scene where like they bring the wagon up to the door, but like it can't go through the set because it's too wide, so they just cut it and then they bring the wagon to the other side of the set. And I just lived with it.
Did they just film this at medieval times? I mean, I can't remember the movie that well. Like
they just all put on rollerblades and the movie was pretty much half done.
I mean, I think it's an important kind of story. The idea, at least the way I remember it with the original, is that he has a farmer's almanac. He's the witch's almanac with him. He's the farmer's almanac. And so he knows when the weather's changing, right? And so he can basically predict the weather. So they put him in charge of the
Oh.
kingdom right away.
It wasn't
then-
the Gray's Almanac.
Apocalypto.
But basically, the same idea. It's a time traveler with the almanac that can predict
Mhm.
everything. And
It's
then
a very once and future king kind of thing, the way they keep repeating the plot, even in smaller microcosms. I'm sorry, Andreas.
no, that's exactly the point. I mean, do you think this happens? I mean, they're setting up resets this way.
Well, I think this can be connected to the Oz topic as well, because I just posted
Yeah.
something about
Certainly.
the king. Well, the knights. Well, yeah. I mean, if you look at it, the poster, right? The kid in King Arthur's court, he's wearing the cap with the
Right.
K, right? What is the name of the team? Do you know? I haven't
I
seen this
forget.
movie yet.
But I can go back to it.
It's got to be the Knights, right?
Yeah, it's good. Of course. Come on. It has to
It has to
be.
be,
It
right?
must be the Knights. Yes.
Okay.
No question.
Yeah, because
100%
there's some syncs with some shows I watched in the past, like say the Watchmen series, right? On with the what is it, the K11s, the
Fun fact. Guess what my high school team was called?
Oh yeah, that's right.
Synchromystics.
7K. Okay.
Pretty trippy. I don't know.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, yeah, I would know. I'm sorry. I just kind of looking at. I post a whole bunch of Oz stuff in the message board, so you see.
Oh, do I
But,
go to? Should I go to the messages here?
Yeah.
You're saying? Okay. One second.
Yeah. I don't know if you guys want to jump through that.
No,
yet.
I do. I'm down. I just want to make sure I pull it up. Where do I start? At the
Oh,
base?
just-
All the way at the beginning. My God, at the beginning of the Railbrick Road.
I'm
Okay.
just trying to like compile all these things that
Based.
that
All right, here we go.
that,
The Lord is a Migdal Oz.
So Migdal Oz is, well, David can probably explain more on that, but it's basically the name of God originally, right?
It's funny. The last episode without
the
David's
strength of
called
power.
Oz's Strength. I thought was the irony. So yeah, you're gonna have to get into that.
Yeah, well, Oz is strength, but Migdal is tower, right? If I'm not mistaken. It's
Oh,
it's
you're
one-
saying because they have the same gematria, huh?
no, not gematria, but it was from the Bible, right? It was from what is it, Proverbs 11. I forgot where it's taken from.
Plus
But,
7-Eleven, which is like what every 7-Eleven is. I mean,
Yeah.
come on.
So if you look at a clock, right? So you can see the clock he's holding. It actually says it's pointing at 7 and 11.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
So there's that clue right there.
You're tripping
But,
me out right now a little bit because I was up till like 6 a.m. with Lana Del Rey's new album. There's a tunnel under Ocean Boulevard, and I could go on a tangent, but I'll just try and stay focused. There, I was pairing it with a film called 7-Eleven Ocean Drive from 1950. And yeah, this is like a whole thing I'm exploring right now. But I was looking at the meaning of that too, like relatable to the Oz thing, because actually, like, so I don't know if you guys know, Jason Barrera has been on a whole trip with Lana Del Rey and David Bowie and Thelema. So he's like looking at particularly Kenneth Grant's ideas and are arguing ways in which it seems like they were influential to both of these musicians. And he basically makes the argument that Lana Del Rey is continuing on with like David Bowie's like contribution to the great work. And so like at this point in her album series, which he's corresponding to the Sephiroth, while he's relating to David Bowie's whole career up until his albums up until 1999. So he's like up until this shifting point, he's got these 22 albums, which he's corresponding to 22 pathways. But the idea of the tunnel under Ocean Boulevard is relating to Gimel. So like you guys know, like the High Priestess is associated with Gimel in the correspondences utilized by say the Golden Dawn and the OTO,
Did
etc.
you see Stefan's thing? Canaanites as knights, also interesting.
Ooh.
Keep going, sir.
Yeah, set the night on fire. Yeah, so basically the idea is like when you're looking at the High Priestess in the Rider Waite deck, you'll see she has like the ocean behind her. And so apparently people relate that is because of Bina is associated with the ocean, and that they argue that through the Arcana, when you see that there's like a stream that runs through them, so there's like a river that runs through different cards, like including like the Empress and the Hanged Man, and that's all running from as you're looking at a communication regarding the Shefa, so like the emanated flow as it moves through the tree. And so the idea was like there's a tunnel under Ocean Boulevard, like that's the placement of Da'at. So like in European terms, you'd say, you know, they relate to that as this abyss. So it's like crossing the abyss. It's like Jupiter and beyond the infinite. To say that there's like a hidden tunnel speaking to like the nature of the dimensional shift that happens between the terrestrial seven lower Sephiroth and the supernal triad above, that, and that relates to the Masonic G and all this stuff. But he was like looking at how that album relates to the, like, basically Keter. So you're going from Tiferet to Keter in one vertical dimensional spiritual movement, and so it's like a hidden tunnel, so to speak. It's really tricky.
How does that relate to the G?
Because Gimel is G, right? So even though it's C, like when you say camel, like camel in English comes from Gimel, and so like but the idea is that there's no other, you know, equivalent of G in the Hebrew. G is this placement. So like that is this is essential. So like I've explained it many times, but I love explaining it.
You could explain it a million times and everyone will always learn
And
again.
so many
Right.
superheroes.
So basically, like if you're looking at the lightning flash that extends through the Kabbalistic tree, that has this kind of like diagonal, horizontal, diagonal expression, that in order to get from Bina, understanding, to Chesed, it says loving kindness, but yeah, mercy, you know, you have to pretend this isn't a correct chart right here, because it has extra pathways and stuff that don't exist.
Oh, this guy, what do you want?
That's also false, because it has that weird pentagram thing. They're like, there we go, look at that one. So
yeah, it looks
that works.
more vibey too.
Totally. So if you look at where Bina is, and then you look at where Chesed is, there's no diagonal line that goes through them. So if you're extending the 777 lightning flash through the tree, you have to pretend that vertical pathway is a diagonal when it isn't, and that's G. And so that right there is like, yeah. So there's this whole thing where if you add up the 12 diagonal pathways through which the Klipot rule the lower worlds, you get 865. If you add the Gimel, you get 868, which is the gematria of Netivot, which is the Hebrew for those mystical pathways themselves. Like that 868 doesn't equal very many things mathematically with Hebrew except for that. And so this is a significant point, because you're basically, these are different dimensions. So the vertical, just like when you do the cross, you know, it's like you have the terrestrial is the horizontal and the spiritual is the vertical. The diagonal is what's in between. And so there's this idea that we're having to pretend that this spiritual dimension isn't actually a spiritual dimension, even though this is like basically like we're directly linked to the mind of God, right, so to speak. So through Keter, through the middle pathway, through that middle pillar. And so basically what the Masonic G kind of shows is like it's showing you the interlacing of the terrestrial with the spiritual, with like the square and the compass. So the compass is actually Bina, Keter, and Chochmah, and the square is Gevurah, Tiferet, Chesed. And so like, and what links those is that G. And so yeah,
So many superheroes. You just caught my train of thought. So many superheroes, in my opinion, go through the Da'ath path as they go through the underground tunnels that are like kind of their origin stories. Like Shazam and Dr. Fate, and like you have so many people on the exterior on these nameable real streets in New York, and then you go underground for many of the other characters who have more arcane powers or origins alone. Shazam is really specific because he goes a little bit past the train tracks and into this dark tunnel where they actually have all these statues that are some sort of, I can't remember exactly, but it's like archetypes that would fit into the Egyptian pantheon and
right. What's
Greek
Shazam
pantheon.
stand for again? It's like, well, Zeus, and then Herod, and
it's got that lightning flash symbol that just screams to me of exactly what I'm talking about.
Exactly, and he goes from a child
Solomon,
to
Hercules,
past
Atlas,
the sphere
Zeus,
of understanding,
Achilles, and Mercury.
Wasn't his original name Marvel?
Yes, Captain Marvel.
Marvel.
Dude,
it's
the
Marvel
Frank,
Comics upset, and then
Frank,
DC
you're tripping me out, dude. You look so much to me right now like Alan Moore, And maybe it's just like your hair and the way you're positioning. Like I'm just like I'm
No,
expecting you to like put your
that's a
hand up and for
life.
it to have these like rings
Life
on it
path.
that are like all like
That's a life dedicated to the man, and method acting too badly to where it rubs off in this awful physical way. But out of all the people to be morphing into, I would be very happy with that choice.
I don't
You
mind
just
it.
gotta grow like a really big coat of beard.
Yeah.
Some of the early text which referred to
Oh my God.
Constantine and
Dude.
Swamp Thing were choices that are made not so
Mercurius.
much out of popularity for the books at that time. They were popular, but more
Grant-
so because
Grant
people-
Morrison must die.
Oh no, I got an
You're
arch
too
enemy
good at
now.
that, dude. You're too good at that. Yeah.
My God. But yeah, Shazam
Grant
is
Morrison makes comics out of sadness and my faults. I'm sorry, Andreas,
that's fair. No, honestly, I'm glad you did that because I have a feel on that myself. Anyway, Mercury
I
though,
enjoy
just
it.
Solomon, just the idea that you've got Solomon the wise, Mercury the messenger, Achilles, Zeus, and Atlas. I mean, and Hercules, right? These are the powers that make up Shazam, and without them, Shazam would be,
A
just
boy.
Billy Batson, which is son of
Right.
the Bat. Come on, everything about there's a reason why they sued them.
Well, when Marvel and DC divided, you got to remember there was a bunch of old guys who were just cranking out books and could care less what the characters' names were. And then Marvel and DC divided, and you have all these clones that are even very archetypal in the Greek sense. So, like, you have Quicksilver and the Flash, or you have Darkseid and Thanos, or there's so many examples where you're looking at the same character, but they had to, for copyright reasons or whatever, paint one blue and one red, stick them in DC.
Didn't the Romans have that same problem with the Greeks? Like they were like, there's like some weird copyright stuff that they had to get
would make
around.
perfect sense in the whole story. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. This brings up Black Adam too, and one of the villains in Black Adam is Sabak, which is sort of the antithesis of Shazam because Sabak stands for Satan, Asmodeus. I can't remember the other ones, but it's essentially like an amalgamation of a bunch of acronym of a bunch of different demon names.
It's the Crowley and Shazam. Okay.
Well,
Yes,
or Jabalon.
SABAC.
So Jabalon is so essential for like that whole conversation about Oz because you have the on part of Jabalon is Heliopolis in the Greek, but it's the Hebrew for Heliopolis. And so if you actually look at the gematria for Oz versus On, both mean strength. But On deals with like ambitious, like acquisitiveness, like the idea of conquering. And so like they're two radically different definitions using the same translated term. So people will say like On is strength, but like it's like Crowley's lust card is best embodied with On, whereas like the strength card of the Rider deck is relatable to Oz. The gematria of Oz is 77. The gematria of On is 707. Kind of weird,
but I mean, it's because that's weird because we talked about how Heliopolis was called On, and it wasn't called. I mean, so this is Heliopolis On and Oz equivalent? Then are we supposed to make that point that Oz and
literally
On,
the pillars? Check that out.
Yeah. Adorable. Yeah, I mean, it's also interesting because Shazam's from the Canaanite region, right? That's like what it says on his wiki, which is fun. So they started with that story. But yeah, I wonder about On and Oz because I don't feel like they're exactly the same. I think one is strength and one is power. I don't think they're the same.
Well, no, there's radically different definitions of what constitutes strength. So On is basically like what we as in a society relate to. That's how this relates to the sustaining order of the empire versus the shefa or the emanated flow. And so like the emanated flow is the organic natural expression of strength that exists in nature, the resilience of nature's ability to compensate for what comes its way, just that natural intelligence. Whereas On relates to human will, human endeavor, which one could argue isn't ultimately separate, but at the same time, like this isn't just like when Crowley named it lust, he's not just talking about like base level sexuality. He obviously had no issue there. He's talking about lust of result. So when he talked about like a perfect action, he's saying an action that's delivered from the lust of result, like that it's not under the like that's ego, right? So like the idea of like that you're gaining something, which is also the problem with knowledge and da'at in the first place. Like da'at relates to, like, we relate to that in a society as like you accumulate knowledge and that kind of like determines your worth. Like, and it's also related to sex, and they're the same word. Da'at is sex and knowledge in Hebrew, right? So it's like that idea of like conquest. Like, not everyone has to relate to sex like conquest. Not everyone needs to relate to knowledge as like that you're building something up, you're amassing something, because that's an illusion in both cases, you know. And so like to relate your identity through that, like, you know, is kind of absurd in a way. But we
Sex is
definitely
an inner death, and then you know, gaining knowledge is the death of your stupid self. That might be really stretching it, but
We're
right,
talking
but I guess,
about
yeah.
I was gonna say we're talking about sex, death, and knowledge and Judaism, and I'm just curious, since we're on this little tangent, what do you think about the curse of Ham? And
Right.
what does that
Oh.
represent? Was that sex related? Was that knowledge related? Because I've always heard the interpretation that maybe Ham or perhaps Cain, due to an interpretation, saw, you know, like magic happening or saw some kind of like godly power, and that was the ultimate sin, and it wasn't just because he saw daddy naked, or, you know, maybe even did
Right,
something
right,
dirty
in
with
the
daddy.
tent. That weird thing that
Right.
happened with dad in the tent.
Yeah, what
that about?
was that, dude? What was that, like knowledge, or did he just bang his dad when the dad wasn't looking?
Awkward tent moments.
It's the Bible.
Slip.
It's a question you got to wonder. I mean, it's a weird part of the Bible.
So this is why he's not too kosher, Ham.
Yeah. No,
Well,
Ham
this
is
is what got his ass
dietary
kicked off the
concern.
boat.
Ham is also, there's like, for a long time, there was a lot of racism. They would call black people the sons of Ham because they said they were burnt black, because Ham was burnt black or hot is what the word meant, you know. So it was like he was burnt from the experience or something.
Right. Oh, can I just say, like, when we were talking about On, like, the context is that Qabalah. So
Right.
we discussed this before, but like this is significant. Like, you're talking about that superhero that has the different demonic names or whatever. This isn't necessarily like, this is
Sabak,
Baal,
yeah.
On, and Jah, or Yud Hey
The strength
Vav Hey,
of
right?
the god the strength of the god Jah, right? Or is that
Right.
El? Yeah.
Right. So when you go the way it says it, like it says, it's saying strength, but it's really weird because so one of the cool things about this is that, you know, when you do the Masonic lion's paw handshake, there's the three fingers that are emphasized, like go on the wrist, and those represent the Bible verse, which says all my heart, all my mind, and all my strength, which is communicated in Wizard of Oz with the you know, heart, mind, strength. Tin Man needs a heart, Scarecrow needs a brain, Lion needs courage. And so that's the whole basis of like their journey, that they're on this mission. And what do? They get these substitute representations of that, and it's like communicating like the qliphothic side of things. It's like, that's like what society is. We'll give you a fucking diploma and call you intelligent. We'll give you a fucking clock and say, here, you actually have our, like, it's not the thing in itself, it's a substitute. And so like what I would argue is like that whole thing around the stone that the builders rejected, that's communicated in terms of Shakina, is that, you know, she's a base, she's pushed to the base of the tree, and then what's put in her place but this kind of substitute version of her. And then as long as we're relating to that, we're destined for further confusion. So like that's inevitable, helter skelter, because you can't put a replica of something and then imbue that replica with what you call strength and expect, like, the point is that it's not as strong as what's in nature. So you can't expect it to endure, which is also the meaning of the temple when David's told not to build the temple, and then Solomon goes ahead and builds it anyway, and kind of looks for loopholes. And that's always one of the things that trips me out about, like, you know, in Judaism, is that you have like a lot of looking for loopholes. It's like, instead of just acknowledging the thing as it is, I think that's a lot of what Pi is about. When he's like, you know, I'm sure you've written down every 216 number and you've intoned them all. And he's like, where has that gotten you? And he says, the number is nothing. It's the syntax. It's the meaning. It's what's between the numbers. It's like, what he's pointing at there is that, you know, we make these mental idols and we look for like ways to get around things. And it's like, can you just fucking look at the thing in the face and like acknowledge what you're already doing? So like, that's one of the weird things with this, with Crowley, with like the Saudi Star issue, is that I feel like it's so honest. Like it's I don't see that. Maybe there's other arguments with him or whatever, but I don't see that as black magic necessarily. I see that as an articulation of what we're in the midst of and what we're actually dealing with. So instead of just looking at the tree for what it ultimately ideally would be in terms of its spirituality, you can also see like, well, what are we in the midst of? Like how are we oriented, and what is the defect that we're basically placing into that perfect structure, you know?
Yeah.
I wanted to also, hey Bernie, what's up? Welcome to the show. Is your audio working? Give yourself
you're muted.
How about now? Is it sounding better?
That's better. Yeah. Did you have a thought on the Sephra? You had some thoughts.
Yeah.
Right?
And
Jabalon.
there, David. Good point on the Hebrewic practices of trying to find these loopholes, and that there's a lot of that also in the Sunni monarchies throughout the Gulf Coast as well, where they building these artificial islands where you can drink alcohol because it's not
Sunni's pretty into the Talmud,
land,
yeah,
it's human created land, and that how morally ethical and responsible and holy are these people if they're preaching one thing but then practicing ways to evade God's rule but through man's corruption, sort of
Dude,
thing.
1/64th ham is how you make a soup okay. I wanted to also bring this up because I blew my mind a bit, but of course this makes sense. I just had thought it, but I never read this. Yeah, Rastafari. It has been suggested the Rastafari word for God, Jah, comes from the term Jabulon. Although the name Jah, a shortened version of Jehovah, appears in the King James version of the Bible in Psalm 68:4, the term Jah also appears throughout the Psalms and other Bible translations. For instance, the Darby translation or the Young's literal translation. William David Spencer in his 1999 Dread Jesus proposes that Archibald Dunkley and Joseph Nathaniel Hibbert were among the preachers that inspired the Rastafari movement, and that both were members of the ancient mystical order of Ethiopia, a fraternal order derived from the Prince Hall Freemasonry. So, I mean, that makes sense. I mean, I can't prove it off the top of my head, but I'd look at it. And
right. Well, there's no J in Hebrew, you know, that's the thing. So,
yeah,
like, if you're saying like Yud, you know, I mean, that's like, yeah, it's, I don't know, it's kind of strange. I love in Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade when he's figured out how to like step on those things, spell out Jehovah, and he's like,
Jay,
why
no!
in the first place? Anyway, I'm sorry, it's so obvious, but
that's a good one. It's a good scene because you're like, remember what my daddy taught me, kind of a moment.
Yeah, totally.
God. There was more Zardoz stuff. Let me go back a bit. So after the first one, where we go, this one, Kansas all weekend. Last of Us, Kansas Kansas is free. So what was this about, the Super Bowl ad or what?
Well, yeah, this one, I gotta go back to that. Wait, hold on. Yeah, no, it just some things I felt like were so syncing with well, because they were trapped in the Kansas City, and that was supposed to be the the weekend that they aired that episode of Last of Us coincided with Super Bowl, you know, Kansas Chiefs versus
Yellow Brick Road, man. It's Yellow Brick Road. I feel like there's something to it. We're not in Kansas anymore. You know,
Eddie, you had a picture of Jericho there?
Yeah, Jericho. Yeah, Jericho, of course, that also was mentioned. Oh, wait, hold on. Did I just close the whole thing? I'm trying to read it. No, but yeah, Jericho basically had the
Kansas nuclear wasteland.
Hold on, let me scroll down. Well, actually, I forgot what happened. I gotta read the host. I gotta read this because there was because there are these cities that were surviving right during that period when the cities were being blown up. Again, sorry, I'm a little scatterbrained right now. I'm trying to think.
Take it down.
I actually didn't watch Jericho yet. You guys want to refresh me? It's like I like the idea because the name is literally biblical, so it's got to be.
Skeet Ulrich?
Yes.
Isn't he? Yeah.
He's
still
adorable. Johnny Depp.
After as good as it gets. Yeah, he's like the people's Johnny Depp, I think.
The Wish.com Johnny Depp.
Oh wait,
from Scream to Jericho.
Yeah,
dude, exactly. Did you guys anybody watch the not the newest Scream, but the one that's like, what do they call it? It's a requel. Did you guys watch the Scream requel? So I watched that. I knew who the fucking killer was within as soon as they showed up on screen. I knew who it was going to be, and I don't feel like this is a spoiler alert because you'd have to be so stupid to not catch it, or just Like it's basically that you know, have you guys seen Once Upon a Time in Hollywood?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
freaking
Great-
Susan
great movie.
Atkins. So it's the woman who plays Susan. I'm just spoiling it. I don't give a fuck. So like, yeah, I'm like, dude, there's no
Did
way.
you do
She,
this
like,
on opening night too? You just stand up in the audience.
yeah. 'Cause the thing is called Stab, right? The movie that's in the movie of the Scream series. So like,
Sure.
they're like the killings happen, and they make these Stab films or whatever. And I'm like, they got the woman who just played Susan Atkins. I'm like, of course, and she's so good at being like in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. She freaks out at the end. I'm like, they're good. They're not going to use this actress and not have her do her thing that she showed that she can do. So not only
Right.
that, but they set her on fire, just like in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and she
Oh,
freaks
really?
out in the exact same way and runs around. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm being a major spoiler.
Character
right now,
actors, you know, was
but,
just
you know, but
just
yeah,
do one
anyway.
thing. That's all they want from you.
God.
God.
Right, but it's also like archetype casting. So this isn't
Right.
just typecasting. This is archetype. It's symbolic. So
Sync casting.
Oh,
it's not a deep symbolism, but yeah, it's there.
You gotta think about that
well,
Munch painting.
I'll do, before I forget, I don't know if I mentioned because I missed the show last time, but in Los Angeles we had a tornado.
Yes, yes. Let's talk
We had
about
a
the
crazy
tornado.
tornado, and that
was
happened
happened last week while we were. Yeah, exactly. I was like, "What are you
Yeah.
doing? Are you all right?" I mean, my
Yeah,
God.
but what was the coincidence? It was overlapping with something. I'm trying to remember.
The Wizard of Oz tornado? No.
No,
yeah,
no,
obvious.
that was part of it.
Oh, you know, because
Gotcha.
that was the episode. That was the last episode. Frank was there. You guys were talking about Oz when the tornado
Yeah.
was touching down. So I thought that was kind of funny.
It was very
Yeah.
weird, yeah.
I feel like there's something to this whole thing. And so the guy I wanted to bring up earlier was Jasper Mascaline. I think is that how you say his name is. Yeah, good, Mascaline. So I don't know. I get these weird, like, what are they called? Nostalgic, memory-based. My mind just gets taken over. So for the last 3 days, I've been thinking about Jasper Mascaline. I remember as a kid hearing about this guy, and I think he's also featured in a sense in Raiders of the Lost Ark because they go into where the boats are in that giant mountain. It's not a real mountain. It's this optical illusion camouflage. So Jasper Mascaline was in charge of that and a number of other projects. He was a entertaining wizarding sorcerer magician who did mostly magic tricks like illusions. He's mostly an illusionist, but his family for the last 3 generations were these royal magicians, right? And had like 60 patents to their name. I think the patent for the coin-operated door to the toilet was owned by the Mescaline family. So,
wait, so you're saying his ancestors were not just practical magicians; they were actual relationists of a magical group? Or?
Withholding a toilet from somebody for money is kind of a practical magic. If you think
I
about it.
wasn't doubting that.
I mean, in a sense, but that's the truth of it, is that the illusion is all in how you look at something. And so he became very important to the camouflage efforts. For one time, they were trying to hide the harbor of Alexandria. And they realized the best way to hide the harbor of Alexandria, turn it off and build an entire fake harbor on the other side of the bay, light it up, and have a bunch of floating, sawdust and hay bales in the water that have lights put on them, and rig them for some explosions to make it look like that's already being attacked. Things like that are also.
But wait, he did the inflatable tanks, or claimed to have designed some of them? That's a huge thing.
He did inflatable dummy tanks.
That's what I mean.
Right. So he invented they look like real tanks, and they would lure people towards these tanks, and then the other tanks would be disguised as trucks. I don't know, like this could be a tank.
Right.
No, that's not the right one.
It feels like this illusionist talk could totally be a segue into trans issues.
Oh my God, Dave!
Oh my God!
I didn't even think
I duped you.
I'm saying.
But I was gonna show just for a second. Yeah, the trans trucks. You're right. Oh God, it's coming. But my point was more. Yeah,
this is
the
interesting too,
inflatable-
because it looks like MI9 recruited him, right?
Right.
So MI9 recruits this guy because he's a good stage magician, has all these deception techniques, and it reminds me of the CIA did something similar to a stage magician named John Mulholland. Which they used to help do stagecraft and sleight of hand tricks to basically dose people with LSD and all kinds of other like really cool stuff.
Dude, you have been coming with the CIA history stuff on Twitter. I've been loving it, dude. Like
X-Men, I'll keep dropping it too.
oh my god.
Wait,
Yeah, some of those I forgot about. I was just like, wow, if you don't keep up with the Kardashians on this stuff, they just, it's easy to forget.
So their
'Cause
dirty
it-
tricks manual evolved out of these guys. I think the collective stage magicians, deception or whatever,
Yeah,
working
absolutely.
their way into
But John,
intelligence, whatever, which
John
was a huge
Mulholland,
part of World
is this
War
the same
II.
John Mulholland that with the water power? This is not the same Mulholland, is it?
I
No.
don't believe
You
so.
know-
This
you know,
guy
Mulholland
was
Drive
famous
was-
as a stage magician.
Okay,
Right.
but you know the Mulholland, the Mulholland Drive is named after the guy who created the LA River,
Right.
and bring water to Los Angeles.
Mhm.
William
No.
Mulholland.
Oh, William. Okay, never
Yeah.
mind. It's a different Mulholland. I wonder if they're related. But
Probably from the same
one is
part of
September
Ireland.
11.
Right.
He looks fun.
You got a siren after you again, Eddie. Oh man. Thomas showed us the Who Me operation to be used by the French.
Is this something I'd
physicians.
come up with?
Smelled
And-
strongly of fecal matter and was issued in pocket atomizers intended to be unobtrusively sprayed on German officers, humiliating him and by extension demoralizing the occupying German forces.
Stink bombs, right? They just invented stink bombs and whoopee cushions and got paid to do it.
So, I mean, this is interesting because of the Wizard of Oz, because his whole thing was illusions and not actually having power. And of course, that ended up being the thing that they needed in order to keep the Oz working, keep it strong, keep Oz strong.
Right.
Somebody's talking about Mark Passio in the comments. This is kind of interesting.
Who's Mark Passio?
Mark
This
Passio. Yeah, he worked with, what was his
Titanic
group that-
mindset.
Yeah, is it just
It was mainly like media mind control stuff. I don't
Media
remember
Monarchy?
viewing,
Is that what it's called?
perhaps.
Uh,
I don't remember viewing a whole lot of it, but I remember thinking, oh, he's got his stuff together.
I've
Wasn't
met
anything
him at
wrong
one
with
point. Was that in Olympia? I forget. But yeah, interesting stuff. Yeah, he's
I
just-
think these are the patches. There's ones that look like this, like a magic hat
Oh,
for
that's awesome.
camouflage patches. The one that I was looking for has got a bunny, a white bunny being pulled out of a black hat on a red patch. So a lot of these red patches I've noticed. There are a lot of these magic patches, right, for military groups, and
Do you
particularly
guys
camouflage.
know Trevor Pagland, a journalist and photographer who wrote the book I Could Tell You, but You'd Have to Be Destroyed by Me?
No,
Let me look for your rabbit in there. There's probably a bunch of magic. I know there's a bunch of just straight gay aliens, gray aliens in here. There's just
Great
all
pride,
these
yes.
gay aliens. Our military's obsessed with gay aliens. It's in the Navy. It's in the Air Force.
Coincidentally, gray aliens are in fact gay.
we have to do a whole episode on that. That would be way more popular. That's what people want to see.
He took
So-
our gerbs.
So let me see how I can. Can you guys see that?
Mhm.
Let me
or-
let me
or what are you
solo
saying?
let me
It
solo
was
your
just-
screen. I didn't realize you had the book. My bad.
Oh no, no worries. Can you see that at all?
Wow, the gray on top of the yeah.
It looks
the-
like an Air Force
just a-
symbol.
Weird insignia. It's acronym for Tactical Exploitation and National Capabilities Programs, developing applications out of reconnaissance, satellite capabilities. Special always means black or classified. Odivent du Matuant is associated with Caligula, depravity, madness. Let them hate so long as they fear. Yeah, there's a ton of gray aliens here. Here's one of these great National Reconnaissance Office owls, and they own the night. And let me see. Oh, here's the NRO owl. Very millennium-looking symbolism.
Mhm.
The all in all. Okay, here's two grays. To Serve Man, of course, that's a play off of the Twilight Zone episode.
I think you
That's
mean
interesting.
Simpsons.
Hmm?
I'm just kidding.
Magicians also another magician's patch right there. You know.
Mars
Darren
is
Brown's
the
another
only-
one of these guys worth mentioning in this.
What's his name?
Darren Brown. You
Darren
know
Brown, yeah.
Darren Brown's. I think we've discussed him before, but yeah, he's like expert at neurolinguistic programming stuff. But what's really cool about him is that
Oh right.
he'll do mind bending, like psychological tricks, and then he'll often explain to you exactly how he did them. And so like not everybody does that. Like so a lot of people will like blow your mind, but they won't be like, okay, how did I get you to fall for that, you know?
If you haven't seen it, he's got one special episode where he's got what he says like an arcade machine that's like you fight zombies, but he trains these people into thinking that zombies are actually real. So when they go and play this game, he basically puts them into this hypnotic trance. And when they come back to, they really think that they're being assaulted by actual zombies and they're like fighting for their life.
Is
Wait,
that in
that's
the
how I think-
Experiments series that
That's
he
how I
did?
think Columbine was pulled
I think it
off.
was, yeah.
Where did it come from? What's the name of that?
The Experiments. There's like if you type in Darren Brown Experiments, they're all good. Like I would recommend all of that stuff. And
I'm familiar with that. Just that exact scenario, like the training dreams or people thinking they're shooting zombies and then they're real people or whatever. That's how I think mass shootings happen.
Some of them. They're on YouTube,
Someone
remember?
thinks there's coins.
some of them. Let's be
The
Someone
ones
thinks
the ones that happen in
there's-
Minecraft.
Right.
Well, I mean, like,
Not.
I
yeah.
think that you switch off somebody's brain and then you wake them up and you go, this is just where you're used to playing video games. You just shoot, you collect coins, and what they're seeing is they kill a scary looking zombie and there's points above their head, but they're walking through an elementary school. That's how I think. these
Right.
things
So
are
that's the
pulled
thing
off.
with. So he reenacted what is claimed happened by conspiracy theorists with Sirhan. So he takes what the conspiracy theorists said in the series
Yeah.
The Experiments, and he basically he recreates it. He takes a large group of people, narrows down who the person in this large group is, who's the most susceptible to hypnosis, and then he goes on to use him for a psyop with God, what it's some comedian, it's Stephen Fry, who's kind of a national treasure in England, right? And he gets him to shoot him with blanks at an event with an auditorium filled with people, and they're told something's going to happen, but they don't know what, and to not interfere. So like, and this guy basically he blacks out. But what you're saying is really applicable because Sirhan claims that the last thing that he remembers was white polka dots on a blue dress that this woman was wearing, and then he checked out and he was in a shooting range in his mind. And so to this day he's been denied parole, and supposedly they said if you just admit that you remember shooting Bobby Kennedy, whatever, that will be enough for you to get parole. And to this day he says that's not what I remember. I was in a shooting range. I don't know, and I missed sections of my life leading up to the shooting, you know. So
there was a
finally got
project
parole. He finally got the parole like last
Project
year,
Orion
Oh,
in
he
the
did?
early
Oh, okay.
90s.
Wow.
Project Orion in the early 90s was the attempt to mix SSRIs and video game consciousness to make the same kind of super soldier, assassin, and throwaway assassin they had been trying to pick off the tree of MK Ultra, and they could never really like get that right. This is, of course, a millionth sub branch of MK Ultra. Of course, MK Ultra has a couple of popular things that are on every documentary, then 144 sub projects, all of which the paperwork was thrown away, and then thousands of things under that, like entire programs in England that were separate from the ones we call things like Monarch in America. But everything I've read from the testimony of people, this even mixes into the training dreams that abductees and super soldiers have, and just putting all this info together, even kind of kooky William Cooper ideas and everything, what I came out with essentially was what we know about every single mass shooter. The one fact is the SSRIs. And then, you know, we used to look for, did they have a military background? Did they go crazy in the army or whatever? But now it's much more, how can you just take a person who's really enthused and into video games, but otherwise antisocial, and that's like an entire half a generation these days, and then use someone
it sucks
like
that we're gonna
that.
get this episode pulled down for talking about it, but yeah, just keep going because it's true.
Oh, my bad, dog.
No,
I
it's
meant
fine.
like
It's fine, it's true.
cartoons, man.
No, but
Cartoons
yeah,
is crazy.
video game SSRI is this new video game expansion pack for Cyberpunk. No, yeah, but the problem is people will. So let me take it to another place in the same place at the same time. CPAP machines, right? So you got a bunch of boomers, and they built this whole infrastructure on themselves where as long as they have a product from a company that only exists for 3 years before it becomes a new company and they can't keep paying for it, then eventually they'll die because they don't have the capacity to breathe anymore. Now, it's useful if you have sleep apnea, which apparently comes from gingivitis or halitosis and leads to diabetes. apparently, but I'm no doctor, so don't take my advice. I'm just saying this is the world we're building, where we're relying on the corporation. You know, you have to get somewhere, you use a car, right?
Yeah.
You have to breathe, you use an
Yeah.
oxygen machine. You have to be happy or you have to not be sad. You take an SSRI, and if that SSRI is out of your system, how many friends do you have? I have too many who have killed themselves because they didn't have SSRIs, either because they weren't available because the prescription they lapsed before they went and filled it. So for like 2
Right.
weeks, they were just thrown into it, or
Yeah.
they decided they wanted to quit, and just the same thing happened. You know, so it's a terrible thing when people have inconsistency in their medication, to say the least, and maybe it's worth considering that before you start.
And the World Economic Forum tells us that even the oxygen and the free air out there is now a danger to us. So they're going to be policing the insides of vehicles, whether self-driven or not, the insides of buildings, and we'll be sort of allowed and told what's okay to maneuver in a very small city.
It's 23 liters, think so.
that
Why
is-
23? Right?
What the fuck is that,
Why
right?
do we care?
Hey, can I ask you guys a question? Do you guys have looked at a lot of CIA documents and whatever? So like you use the term monarch, and like
Mhm.
I mean I've looked at vigilant citizen for years and blah blah blah, but is
Sure.
there evidence beyond Kathy O'Brien? Is there any documentation of like what Kathy O'Brien is speaking to? I don't doubt in the slightest. Like I
Right,
get that. I get
right.
what she's speaking to, but specifically this idea of the monarch programming, like
There
that.
is-
So
there
the
is-
answer is
there- go ahead.
yes and yes and yes, but that word monarch, nowhere. So in other words, all of the methodology, the extended, how these things turn into more contemporary and contemporary problems using technology where they once used electrodes, and the evolution of CIA brain scientists and everything all falls under what we call monarch and what England calls something like the honor roll. I can't remember
Right,
what
the honor
the
roll,
name is.
right?
I have to
No, it's not
interject.
that. It's
You
not
just
that.
said
But it's something like that.
electrodes.
There's something like that.
What?
Electrodes to the head, right? Like this shock therapy. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, that was Jose Delgado for the CIA
Sorry, just pause you for a
decades
sec.
ago.
And in Canada,
Alchemy.
right?
No, alchemy and electrolysis, and that you would essentially be doing electrolysis to the brain if you had 2 electrodes on either side of it. Like what I'm doing in my jars, that's what you would be doing in your biology.
But they did it to people's
with
brains. So what they
Yeah.
did, they take a woman, they'd give her drugs, they'd electroshock her, they'd wake her
right.
up in 70, 80 days after her listening to a recording of herself saying, like, you were at peace, you were at peace, you were at
Yeah.
peace, or
It's
weird
like
stuff like that.
Psychic Driving by Dr. Ewan Cameron.
And then
Right.
they'd have to teach her how to like
well,
walk and
that's the
poop
next
again.
step. Ewan Cameron was after Jose Delgado was the top of that technology, and then Ewan Cameron and
Yeah,
Michael
Delgado was the bull
Persinger.
guy that did the bull electrodes and a whole number of
Exactly.
other
Oh,
ones.
Oh,
and many,
right.
many
No,
other
no.
There's also a
electro
more fun one
experiments.
called the electronic carrot, where they basically put a little electronic device into the prostate of an animal and would hit the button on that one too.
Wisconsin's
so
a weird
if-
place, right? Madison, Wisconsin. I wanted to say really quickly before we go too deep, also the
Is
Monarch
this
program,
where
because
cow mutations come from?
if you go to California, you'll find a place called Natural Bridges, right? So Natural Bridges, Santa Cruz, is a place where monarch butterflies mate. And fun fact, also where the West and East, or the East Berliners and the Polish adjacent CIA would meet to exchange processors and technology from IBM and from different companies in Silicon Valley. And so I knew my ex-girlfriend's mother's boyfriend or something from long ago. Like he'd visited occasionally, and he lived off the grid at Last Chance. Last Chance is a place in Santa Cruz also where a bunch of people have not paid income tax in decades, and they have guns to keep power lines from getting onto their property. And it looks like something out of Jurassic Park. It's so ancient up at Last Chance. But so they basically created, a place where you could exchange a vehicle for another vehicle. You'd show up, and he would drive up, and then he would have in the back of his car either serious electronics or bunk, so that they knew exactly what they were giving to the East Bloc. And the East Bloc would exchange it for diamonds, gold, cocaine, whatever that they're selling, because it's part of some sort of an agreement. And then they would do these trades right there at Natural Bridges. And there's a lot of talk about the Monarch program in Santa Cruz and in Castroville, Of course, James Holmes was, from Santa Cruz, went to the Castroville High School. And there's a lot of this military presence down there, Seaside, California.
Like the Presidio, there's a lot
Right.
of places like that in Cali.
Seaside, California used to be, no, sorry, not Seaside, Oceanside, or is it Seaside? Yeah, Seaside and East Monterey. Monterey is just so CIA. There's not a lot going on in Monterey except for military, Navy, the university, and then some quiet families, right? But there's a lot of weird going on in East Monterey, including Fort Ord. And the kinds of families that were brought on were military families. So they also had military child, Brack right there. Brack. That's kind of interesting. They have a lot of children that went through these military psychiatrists there as well. So I think that you can find examples of Monarch being bigger than something the United States knew about. It's something that's connecting between the British, the American, CIA, everything going on beyond just the United States and their process of building
the Five Eyes.
Yeah, creating citizens for the next tomorrow. Like we talk about how they gave LSD to their own agents before they gave it to American kids. They were radicalizing super soldiers, and they didn't care who got hurt necessarily along the way because it was in the process of building something that was bigger than to defend the United States or Britain or anything else. It was defending the free agency of the intelligence community.
Sometimes you got to kill 40,000 elephants, right?
Right.
Hey.
Sometimes if you want to make an omelet, you got to kill all the dodo birds in the world.
Do you guys know, like, with James Holmes's science presentation that he did, that he got, like, I guess the biggest grant that a student can get for research?
Yeah.
And you guys,
It puts him down mass murderer. It doesn't put him down as Flash action script programmer at all.
Right.
Yeah.
So what is
Right.
you guys? What is the deal with him with Flash and like the ways he
was trying to
explains it,
find
but it's
ways.
just so over my head. It's just like the time illusion thing that he was working on. Like
He was trying
what
to find a
is-
way he was trying to figure the exact frame rate within something that he could create to, put like subconscious messages in, like the way we understand advertising or whatever. But there was something much more moving about what he was seeing about the research in placing things in Flash and that the frame
Right.
rate or whatever of the way we do.
And weirdly enough,
video on the
Flash was
internet.
killed right after this. Do you remember? Right at this
Steve
moment.
Jobs killed this,
At
dude.
this moment,
Yeah.
though, it's the craziest thing. Flash was just murdered at 2006 after this presentation. 2007, gone. In 2007, they said no
Yeah,
more on the
yeah.
iPhone.
It was right as Unreal released the Citadel demo too,
I have
which
three
proved
action
that it
script
could
books
run.
above my head. I have 3 books on it above my head. Action script 3.0, and I'm good at it. I don't want to say that because now it's associated with mass murder, but that's not what Flash used to be associated with. Super weird.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things where they're going to release a better tool for video on the internet anyway. They might have
In
found
10 years,
one
that's
where
the action
every
script.
supervillain.
They just now in 2023 are barely catching up with what ActionScript 3.0 had. If you watch like examples of ActionScript 3 VR AR from 2007, like the crazy stuff that you could do back then, it was so much more advanced, and you could just use it on a web browser, and you could use a Wiimote, and it was crazy.
Well, and they
the
also had
features.
something called Starling Framework, which let you tap directly into a GPU, where you could actually leverage shaders within ActionScript 3.
Right, but
Got it.
all this stuff you guys are saying, like when you're saying they shut down Flash or whatever, you're just talking about
Steve Jobs shut down
the
Flash.
public's having access to these things. Like all this
Right.
stuff is still
Well, what
around.
killed it
Well,
though? What killed it was that Steve
Sure.
Jobs at one point said no more Flash on iPhone or iOS devices, and that kind
HTML
of
only.
was the nail in the coffin for Flash. Was when
Yeah.
all of a sudden everyone couldn't deploy to iOS anymore, even though it was technically possible. There was no reason that it couldn't work. It was just that Apple was like, and that was
Right,
it.
we're not working with Adobe anymore. And so what ended up happening was HTML started getting those features slowly, and it's been 15 17 years. It's been almost, and they still haven't got all the features in HTML5 that they had in ActionScript 3. It's a lot closer, and I think there are things now that you can access GPU in HTML, and you can do AR in HTML, but it's a lot of work, and the people who know about it are Google. Like you don't actually know how to use those APIs as easily, which might come true soon, but it's just all these people were making Flash games, and it just stopped overnight.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
destroyed an entire kind of art, really.
Yeah.
But the reason we brought it up was because of his time dilation speech. So in the conversation, we've talked about this before. Let me go back further. how far do I have to go? In this video, he talks about his there we go. He talks about time dilation in the software so that you could make a presentation. It doesn't even want me to load it. It's horrible. He wants us to see how space-time can be registered and logged at different moments, and you can respawn to older moments, or you can predict what moment's going to happen and have that as sort of an option that you see, and how this can be useful. And it's really heady. It's really heady stuff that's not being used just for today. But the kinds of people who would use it are marketing experts, because they can predict what you're going to look at. Facebook, for instance, can see what kind of things you're used to looking at, and it can predict where you're going to look next and puts the ad in that place. And it just starts to study you, so it has probability understanding, but temporal order judgment.
Does anybody see this guy giving this speech on these flash videos and go, how does this, like, not out of complete ignorance, but just really look at the guy, what you know about people you've interacted with in your life. Do you see that guy turning into a bomb of bleach that wants to hurt people?
He looks really confused, dude. He looks like he looks like an experiment. Like then. And what's weird is like people say it only got weird like a couple or a few weeks before the incident. They're like, yeah, he started getting weird. But when you look at that, it's not just that he's awkward. It's like, dude, is he just being fucked with? Like his mentor that he cites is just like, I don't know. I hardly knew the kid, you know, whatever. It's like, it doesn't seem like that the way he talks about him. Like it's just so suspect.
But, and not to get all super nerdy, but honestly, I feel like I have it definitely set some red flags off me that he came to these revelations in Flash and not in something like C or like a little bit lower level, I guess.
Also, Robert Holmes' father was a financial fraud analysis guy who was involved with the IMF. You know, just like start tying IMF to shooters, and you'll be surprised. I mean, maybe you won't, but you'll find connections.
I've got so many.
Good. Families that don't mind doing something with their children for an entire agency or an entire psyop or whatever. You know, like there's all these military families where you have to guess somewhere like, wow, did they just spend this kid's whole life pushing him towards the CIA or something like that? But in this case, I don't know, all the shooters, even the bombers, even the McVeighs of the world, there's so much we're not getting, you know, a puzzle. I'm not saying they're free in character of doing wrong, and I'm not saying there's not natural components to their perhaps aggression or each case by case, but in every case, we're not getting enough information about the Unabomber or about the, like I said, McVeigh or anything like that.
I'm convinced that the more you isolate someone, you can radicalize them. Like the more you're isolating the amount of influences they're getting, the easier it is to control all their influences. And now with technology, it's even more, right?
The Unabomber wrote like the most important treatise on technology and exactly how it's going to mess us up as humans, not just business and our future in general or whatever. And it's something that, and when read now, is like, wow, I wish somebody would have came up and said all this to me, or I wish some author that I approved of had written this or something, you know. And I'm in no way saying that any method like the ones he or others used are ever acceptable for trying to change the world, but he had written this thing, you know.
It's interesting to connect him to the CIA and to MK Ultra, right? Because the MK Ultra paperwork came out and showed that they were experimenting on Ted Kaczynski. You know, they were experimenting.
They experimented on him like crazy. I mean, he was years in that program and probably the only listless person that came back every day for another session. And that was mental driving.
Before we get too far from the Monarch stuff, I do want to throw out one interesting theory that's not as common, and that's that after the church hearings and the family jewels were released, basically it put an end to any covert MK Ultra in stateside. So there's some interesting theories that a place called Dignity Colony in Chile might have ended up becoming one of these other, Colonial Dignidad, but you know, it stands for Dignity Colony, that might have been that offshore Project Monarch. Because if you go by the writings of not Kathy O'Brien, but like Fritz Springmeier and a few others, they postulate that Monarch basically happened under like the Denver International Airport or other dumb military bases, but somewhere off of the grid and outside the United States, like Dignity Colony is another really good candidate for this. And Paul Schaefer's entire background is very suspect.
So
Well,
I
think
fun
it's
fact, I
well,
actually
that
I went to Hotel
It's-
Villa Bavaria in Dignidad, Colonial Dignidad, and also
That
Colonial
doesn't surprise
Suiza.
me.
And they have like a Swiss and German festival, and I got like a beer battered squid and like ale, and they have all these people painting local pictures of these weird fairies, like, and they all look kind of similar. They kind of remind me of Brian Froud kind of fairies, and there's some weird, UFO art. You can always get UFO art in that
Yeah.
area. But what was also interesting to me is when they opened the place up and they turned it into a tour, they talked about how originally it was closed off from everything else. And some guy in, I think it was the 70s or 80s, or was it even the early 90s or late 80s, he flew over it and he saw a bunch of these, like, sexually traumatized MK Ultra German clone kids in Lederhosen on LSD or some crazy psychedelic amphetamines we haven't heard of yet, dancing around in the field, singing in German. I mean, or something like I don't know if he heard them, but he just saw the craziest.
All the kids from the surrounding areas that are naturally born in those areas, and all the MK Ultra Nazi Hitler Youth type children, everyone was subject to Paul Schaefer's sexual advances. But I think there is a distinction between the white kids he was trying to make into, another generation of super soldier Nazis, or wherever that leads, at least brainwash them to the ends of the earth. And then other people that he used for the slave labor, the building of all these structures around. There's like Paul Schaefer, and then he was sort of this epicenter that ran out to the kind of things you can see if you're just looking up tourism, Colonia Dignidad, where they have all these cats, like Andreas is saying, dressed like old classic Germans with the their beer and
right, but it's totally fabricated.
Like the
a lot of
Lederhosen,
Germans,
the whole thing.
A lot of Germans never really even wore all that stuff, so they created this sort of Disneyfied,
like traditional Bavarian sort of like everything.
But it's a fantasy.
And you got to think at that time of how many lands we had. So like, pretend that this wasn't a land and it was called Nazi land, but Hollywood at the time was Hollywood land. Then we have Disney land.
I'm gonna have to pull a picture of River Phoenix for just because obviously I don't know.
But these are all programming centers, if you get my meaning. You know what I'm saying?
You get that he was part of a South American Nazi colony, right? That's where he was born and raised, right?
That cat? No, I did not. I know as much as I know about him, I had no idea.
What about Joaquin Phoenix? Does that apply to him too?
Yeah, I think so. What was the deal? Like South America, where's the compound story, right?
Like, Children of God, right?
Well, there was a movie made about it that's called Colony. That was about 8 years ago.
Children of God. There we go. 1973. Caracas, Venezuela. Children of God stationed them to work as missionaries and fruit gatherers. According to Vanity Fair, Phoenix was raped at the age of 4. An interview with Details magazine in 1991. Phoenix said he lost his virginity at the age of 4 to other children while in the Children of God, but he had to block it out. Although Phoenix rarely talked about the cult, he was quoted in an article published in Esquire in 94 as saying they're disgusting, they're ruining people's lives. The Children of God cult. What do you do? Do you tie it to CIA or to the Nazis or both?
What the hell?
Right? There's look at COG, which is the continuity of government abbreviation, but which has a lot to do with UFOs and very current political moves like Space Force and stuff like that. What did you say, Andreas? I'm sorry.
Well, did you tie it to the CIA or to the Nazis? I mean, because they did have
not so far, but I got the idea that what we took from the Nazis and applied to MK Ultra and mind control was absolutely being done here. Beyond that,
I definitely tie it by the 19th century folk movement. So if you move past the 30s and get into really what is the zeitgeist of German folk movement, then the 60s and 70s psychedelic folk movement influenced by Klimt and surrealist painters, and even just look at like German surrealist and then psychedelic posters art, and you'll see that they forced these kids to study in Vienna in order that they would make these 60 psychedelic posters. Go ahead.
And if you wind this back like a generation or two as well, there's a really strong argument to be made that a lot of this Germanic folklore could have never stood the test of time without the Brothers Grimm. And then the Brothers Grimm brought it to another level of going into the forest and trekking by foot and talking to all these people just out in the rural areas and collecting these stories, and then Disney throws a little bit on top of that to keep perpetuating that. So without Brothers Grimm and then Disney, we might not have even had that whole German nationalist movement that where they were trying to like
that's weird.
take back their culture.
Wasn't it Heath Ledger in the Grimm movie that there was another like it's like who the fuck
Brothers Grimm?
Yeah, the movie The Brothers Grimm, right? And they kind of like take from all of the, and it's not just Grimm, they take from all sorts of stuff and just compile
Brothers
it
Grimm
into-
were like the old school Mike Mignola, like in the way that he takes ancient and then World War II arcane things. And
Well,
sort
they
of
started
tells all
it
that
as
mythology.
history. They wrote like about German history first, and then they turned into doing like folklore.
But they collected all fairy tales, all, you know, what we call now like cryptid sort of stories, all that stuff before creating their own versions of them.
Somebody said in the comments that River Phoenix and Joaquin Phoenix have a sister, and wasn't she an SLC punk? Which is funny because I just watched that the other night for the first time since like I was in like high school. But
it's a great movie.
Yeah, it wasn't the same as when I saw it in high school. It's like listening to a Pauly
That's
Shore
a
stand
badass
now.
name,
I
dude.
saw Rain Phoenix
Joan of Arc.
perform at Indio party around Coachella in 2010. She has like a band and does music. Interesting lady.
That's cool.
All these people that were in the Children of God cult, you know, it's weird because I've seen a number of these kinds of Christian cults that emerged in the 80s and 90s after MK Ultra. Florida had this one that they were sexualizing the girls, and they made everybody in the youth group wear black boots. They gave everybody boots and military clothes and had them tuck in their olive shirts and stuff and run. There was a gray shirt and olive pants, cargo pants. They had everybody in this kind of militarized order, and they're trying to say, okay, well, the end is near and you got to go get sinners and convert them. So you find kids and turn them into prostitutes for the church so they can lure in pimps. And it was all about this underground that they were trying to infiltrate the underground with these Christian kids.
When you look at the Process Church and you look at the Manson family, if you just take a walk back to answer your question about if this is CIA, you know, I think that part is obvious. I think they let people go all the way Waco and Ruby Ridge if they choose.
They also lose
to,
control of people. So they'll start out with some idea of what it is that they're going for, and then they go off on their own somewhat, and they don't have complete control. They're just influencing. And so I think that's the part where I differ with a lot of fellow conspiracy theorists. Is I'm just like, you know, the idea of this ultimate control I can't completely get behind, but the idea of like extreme influence, there's not even a question.
I look at them almost like angel
change,
investors or like venture capitalists, where they just throw gasoline on a fire. They don't necessarily know how the fire works. They're just like, here's some gas for it.
Right. And that's the thing about psyops.
Change. If they're largely looking for policy change in some way, or the American people to be, you know, terrified and then leap back and go, give us the Patriot Act or something like that, then they're willing to do as many of these as they think will affect the American psyche and not have any hands-on direct. We don't need to train these guys to be good soldiers, you know. They just want them to go off mentally and then create a thing where the American people go, oh, we need to make a major change to everyone because this is possible somewhere.
You know what insane fucking straw manning it is when you're trying to have a discussion around psyops, and there's this whole thing where it's like people will talk about that it's psyop translates as fake. So the event is fake. These are crisis actors, et cetera, et cetera. I believe there are crisis actors. I believe that there's a lot of fakery. And at the same time, this idea that if you have a false flag or you have a psyop, that no one got hurt, or that what it means for something to be fake, like it's just this theatrical thing. It's all
Must not born in the U.S. You can't be president.
Yeah.
Well, where this hit a giant wall, David, is with Alex Jones. And when Alex was saying that, what he said specifically was that he's been watching footage for 2 days of people walking around the school, including children and adults, and they keep parading them around the same building. Then he sees the same person being paraded in other buildings or whatever, but you're told like it's already evacuated or it's still under fire situation or whatever. And when he asks that, we're now looking at years later where he's been to court and his followers went to parents' houses and everyone subscribed to a thing where it was like a giant joke. But he never said that. He was saying that he thinks crisis actors are sort of increasing in these situations. And then in this
Right, which is a lot of
situation,
opportunism too. So even if you have an event just happens, even if it's not a thing in itself, and then you look at the media swarm and then all the levels of opportunism, including intelligence agency stuff. And so it's
Right.
like, what, where, and then there's Crisis Cast. And Crisis Cast is
Right.
something I never hear anybody fucking talk about ever. If you go, like, just type in crisiscast.com, I think, or
it's a
whatever.
horrifying website. Yeah.
What?
You
You
know,
know
this
about
is
this?
this is
I'm
real.
missing this
God,
chick
I
track.
found
I
the
need
thing.
that chick
God's
track right now.
God's horrors. This is real. This is so. I was talking about that, but they had like articles about it, and even show how they were trying to. The children of God were convincing people that they could become prostitutes. So I guess it is connected to the Children of God cult specifically.
Mm. Yeah. So what is up with when you're looking at the website for Crisis Cast? I don't know. It's changed a bit over time, but if you're looking at like a picture of a just for example, I like to give is a 18-wheeler, a large truck that's turned on its side in a road, and you're looking at
Right.
traffic backed up for miles, and they're literally telling you that this is a staged event, that this is a
Yeah.
practice event, but it's in the world. So like, do the people in traffic know that this isn't a real accident? That it's a like
Probably not in Britain. I would
It
imagine
applies
in
for
America.
like,
everything.
where's the legality of this?
It's
I
so-
can't
it's one of
find
those
it.
things, dude, where,
everything
like-
on that site, you know.
Sorry. It's one of those things where if they're going to auction off your storage facility, then they have to make a public announcement. But what they do is they go and they buy like the cheapest section in like a Thai newspaper that has like the spread of 2 city blocks, and they're like, technically we put a public announcement out there before we auctioned all your stuff off. So I think it's probably along those lines where someone like crossed the T's and dotted the I's of the fine print to technically make it legal.
Right. That's crazy. But okay. Yeah, and look
mean,
at Army.
we
Look
did
at
this at Disney.
G4S.
The example that comes to mind is If Day, of course, which we've talked about before. But If Day was the day that the Canadian British government pretended that what would happen if the Nazis had won the war and had taken over Canada. And so they said everyone would get up in the morning dressed up as Nazi soldiers. They'd take over all the buildings. They'd put up Nazi flags. They put Nazi newspapers in the Winnipeg streets. Let me see if I can go back.
So they
down
had
here.
a Man in the High Castle cosplay in the middle of the war. for
And
one reason.
it wasn't like, oh, on Thursday we're going to be having quite a treat for Winnipeg and Manitoba. No, they didn't tell them.
Every year, the Florida Department of Emergency Management would actually commission Disney to run one of these like crisis things. And one year, I think it was in like 2016 or 2014, the Florida DEM basically hired Disney to run a mock shooting at the University of Florida, or sorry, the one that's here in Orlando. I'm blanking on the name of it just because I'm in the spot, but they actually ran a whole thing where a kid post on social media. It was a fake post on real social media that was like, I'm gonna do something bad at the school tomorrow, and it was to see how many people would report it, how they would react, and they did advertise it, but you wouldn't know about it unless you read like the 4th page of the school newsletter that was sent out on like a Saturday afternoon. So technically they let you know about it, but I think that they're planning on most people not knowing about it. So that's the valuable part of the research, is to see how normal people react, not just a tabletop exercise.
That's like Bernays stuff was never that in like just completely fucked.
He didn't get his
up,
hands
man.
as dirty, right? He just lived in theory, but someone takes that theory and they put it on the ground.
Yeah. I'm going to say something really unpopular, and that's that I'm a bit of an Edward Bernays sympathizer, a little bit. Only because watching him in his older age talk about his experience, and he's just like, I couldn't believe that people could be this gullible. He's like, I had no idea. So he's like, when we did it the first one, he was like, this isn't going to work.
Imagine Edward Bernays in Midjourney and ChatGPT.
Get on that.
He was like, he just couldn't fathom that people would go along with it the way that they did. And then he's like, and then we did another and another and another. And he was rationalizing because he's like, oh, we're just selling people products, whatever. And then it's like at a certain point, it went into politics and it just went completely out of control.
But wasn't he in kind of a collection with Huxley, whatever, and like one or two other either eugenicist
Yeah, this is through
or
the Century Club of New York, and he was actually very close with the Dulles brothers as well.
gotcha. Okay, I'm sorry, David. Please.
No, it's just he wrote, you know, the book. He coined the term public relations in his own explanation as another word for propaganda, because, in his own words, because propaganda got such a bad rap with the Nazis, and so he's the guy, right? But the thing is like where this has gone is beyond. Like, he was an asshole. He's a jerk, you know, in a lot of ways, and like Freud hated him, but Freud wasn't that much better in his own, you know, ways.
Right.
But
Sure.
it's also, Edward Bernays was always also trying to educate people on Freudian psychology while he's doing all this, because he's just like, okay, well, this is working really well. Maybe people should wake up to this in the minute. So he's conflicted. He's divided. He's not completely just like, you know, he's a human being. You know, he's not just like this evil like Bond villain. You know, but
Right.
it's confusing. It's crazy because he's just like, oh, so people are motivated by these unconscious, you know, motivations that they don't even realize why they're really motivated. Like, they think they're attracted to something for one reason, and really it's their unconscious thing that's driving them. And so like he also like, so he got Freud's work published into English, and like wanted English speaking people to learn about Freud. And in fact, if it wasn't for Edward Bernays, there's a real question if we would even know about Freud like we do in, you know, in at least in America. You know, it's like,
Yeah. But I mean,
yeah.
that's still at a level of, you know, sort of playing with the mind, playing with optical illusions and what hooks you can get in the bottom chakras to sell what products, which I
Right.
think is a different dimension than how can we either fake, facilitate, or pretend school shootings. You know, like that's a whole nother, as you say, just a whole nother thing.
We don't want to
Right.
go into
Well, you know that we could talk about that
$1 trillion
movie.
lawsuits.
We could talk about that movie Wag the Dog, though. Also, you guys
Man, what you
remember-
mumbling about? Lawsuits?
Oh, Alex Jones, you know Alex.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
like, yeah, they
Love
decided,
Alex.
they
Don't want his
decided
troubles.
they wanted to make it clear that they were going to attack somebody, you know, and that they do
Yeah.
hurt people, and they were
Oh,
right.
I'm not
they
saying
can.
that like violence
I think
didn't
that's the
happen
thing.
at these things.
No, that's not
or,
even the point. Is the point is that these people will hurt you if you say otherwise.
Right.
You know, but hey, Wag the Dog, important movie about a politician who is in an affair, and so he hires a PR guy to create a war in Armenia to distract everybody, and he's wagging the dog, and he gets the Kirsten Dunst footage, right? They hire Kirsten Dunst as a crisis actor, and again, this is in the movie. They have her holding a Tostitos bag, which
right.
they then
So it must be true.
they track the Tostitos bag and they replace it with a baby, right? And then they replace the green screen with Russia, and they make it look like this is footage from the Ukraine or from Albania or whatever's going on, where this
so another
girl,
night at CNN.
yeah, and see, sorry, it's a cat. They replaced the Tostitos bag with a cat. And she says,
Aw.
when can I put this on my resume? And they're like, you can never put this on your resume. Are you kidding me? Here's your money. Now
Right.
sign this contract that says, you know, you'll go to jail if you tell anyone where you were the last few days, because you were actually in the Virgin Islands is where you were, you know, and they'll just tell you, you know.
So
well,
NDAs are like, how common are non-disclosure agreements?
I
Are
can't
they
tell
just
you.
like, that's the thing.
Now they're
That drives me
everywhere.
nuts. I'm like, dude, they gotta be so
They
fucking common. And even if
are
they are,
everywhere.
Oh boy. Yeah, they're really. I mean, I hear about them all the time now in the comedy world, in the music world, and just the celebrities hanging out at a party world. It gets very, very odd. But also, Project Capricorn, is that the name of the film? I know it's Capricorn, but
It's Capricorn 1.
Capricorn 1, I'm sorry, again, messing it up. But that's an even higher example with the same sort of insidious undertones. In other words, like they're threatening to kill the astronauts' children and wives and things like this immediately when they walk them to what they think is getting on the ship. And before the news can see them and they're actually getting on the ship, it's a very small random office room where a bunch of DOD guys or whatever are telling them, look, the rest of your life, like from today, is going to be wrecked unless,
from
the
today,
ship just came
because they
back
couldn't tell
from
them ahead of time, because when they're doing all of the promotion and all the talking about it, they want
gotta
them to
feel it.
believe that they're part of
Right.
this thing, and
Right.
that's got to, and they show the letdown, you know, like, oh, I thought I was Oh, really? We're not going to Mars?
Well, that's highlighting in the Apollo program for
That's a
me. That's
very good
highlighting
point
when they
right
come back and they're completely listless. You know, they come back, they spend 2 weeks in isolation, and they come to do a meeting with the whole world about, we can't believe you made it, guys. And they're almost, it's complicated for them to speak. One man will say some small talk stuff because the other men are being void of emotion.
This is where they are.
Um,
30 days. They're supposed to be in this little room, and they're just supposed to be polite. And this is crazy. Come on, who bought
those
this?
are
This is why
highly
people wore
educated-
masks this year. you know?
Those are highly
Right.
educated, patriotic guys who think they're going right there.
Oh,
In my
speaking of which, engineered
Some of the
consent is, I believe, Edward Bernays' last book, and it's like it costs thousands of dollars if you do a search for just to purchase Edward Bernays' book if you want a fucking copy of it. And it's a lot of different contributors because he wrote an essay, and you can find that online. But the book itself, I really want to look at this. I want to read this book.
Which one is it?
I've Engineered Consent.
Oh.
Yeah, this is another book on Amazon, I don't think.
Really?
You'll find,
Give me a few
if you
people.
look like shopping,
archive-
like clicking
Archive.org.
shopping just for fun.
Archive.org always is the way to go. Here we go. Boom.
Yeah, but this is the essay. This isn't the full book.
Really?
I don't think so. How many pages
is it? I can't tell right away. 131 pages.
Oh, maybe this is the book now.
Yeah, archive.org for the win, man. The
Archive.org
CIA
for-
actually, and several governments made archive.org delete a bunch of stuff recently, which is super tragedy.
I
Because like,
wanna
hey, this
download
stuff's
this while
not
we can.
supposed to be online. You know, it's like,
You know, what's
well,
funny is I just looked it up on Zlib too, where I
Nice.
found it, and that's where Archive got it, was on Zlib.
there we
Oh,
go.
there you go.
Zlib?
This must be. Is this recent? When was this posted? I'm just curious because I was looking for this a few years ago.
If you don't know
and I couldn't find it.
Zlib is the place
I know
to go.
Zlib,
man.
but I was wondering when it went up. Oh, what you're saying from there when it went up? Yeah, because
It went on Zlib first, and then it found itself on Archive. It looks like.
Wow.
Oh, okay. But
Winners.
anyway, yeah, I'd
Winners.
like that. What he communicates in there. If you want to talk about like freaking like what was the practice run that they did in 2019? For COVID. What's that? What was that giant?
Oh god, the Project 201 or whatever.
Yeah,
the
Event 201.
Event 201, right?
And so like the Event 201 stuff with engineering of consent, from what I read, at least his essay there. Oh my God, it's just the epitome of it, because it doesn't even matter. It's like one way or the other. Whatever you think about origins or whatever you have to say, the opportunism, the way that they used it is just, it's so blatant, man. Jesus.
Do we lose Eddie? Is Eddie not here to talk about Zardoz ayahuasca? Do you remember that scene when it does the ayahuasca? So that's another thought I've been thinking about, is the elite seem to be pushing more and more people away from drugs. I don't know if that's just a consequence of fentanyl production. They're like, we don't control it anymore. But it's
because they got the pharmaceutical industry in line in such a way that they don't need to fuck around in the way that they used to with that, in the same way, to the same degree.
True.
Yeah.
True.
I feel like they used to control, whole subsets of the population. But like, all right, we're gonna get every kid in Connecticut addicted to Adderall. We're gonna get all these kids across the Midwest doing this, and then all the Japanese people will just ban them from drugs at the force of execution. You can have nothing except for alcohol. And
They just wanted them on the right drugs. That was the problem with LSD, right? Was that
I think they want specific people on specific drugs so they can make specific.
So like,
of super soldiers.
I just want to say, like, when we're talking about psyops and stuff, I believe that there are events that can even look staged that are absolutely real and absolutely like real activist events. One example, obvious example, should be Abby Hoffman. When they put the flowers in the barrels of the guns around the Pentagon, I do believe that those people were high as fuck, that he was not in league with the CIA, just the opposite. They're after him for fucking years. And that I do believe, and I'm open, somebody can prove me wrong, but but I do believe that that was an authentic event that happened, and that it did scare the shit out of certain powers that be, because they're like, they had their idea around, we gave this to soldiers and they were busy climbing trees and shit. You get the public on this, ultimate distraction, we can do what we want, and fucking, they couldn't imagine activists on acid,
But that they're using the drugs. I remember the Colorado Batman shooter, whatever, in the theater, and that always they're on these psychoactive or psychorepressive drug prescriptions that are imposed, and then there's always some sort of relation to the FBI that it's like, oh, they've actually had contact with them at this point in the past once. And it's like, okay, they're monitoring them, they're putting them on these drugs, and that, yeah, they're triggering them to actually do these actions. And then there's also simultaneously the crisis actor or the training or whatnot, where it's like, oh shit, it went live, but it's like they were aiming to get this person to choose to sacrifice themselves to take it live that whole time.
Well, there's also, so what about the predictive programming by accident? So you've got CIA that are traveling all around the world. Some of them are on cocaine, let's be honest, and they're listening to a remote viewer saying, I'm seeing this. And I'll tell you what about the world. If you look all over the world, you'll probably find this. You know what I mean? So maybe there's some specificity, but how much is it that they're actually looking for a thing because they're told to look for it? And so then they find the thing, and then that start, it's kind of like the man who knew too little. They're looking for a guy on the street, and they find a guy on the street, right? And it might be Bill Murray instead of the agent. Although he does go Bohemian Grove.
I've got a crazy thread here that hopefully you guys haven't heard before, because this is like deep down in my research, but the origin of SSRIs in this country came from a guy named Julius Axelrod. And if you look up a picture of Julius Axelrod, he looks like a Bond villain. He wears these glasses where one's always black. Yeah, he's always got one eye. So in the mid 1950s, Julius Axelrod is the chief of the section of pharmacology at the National Institution of Mental Health. And while he's there, he comes across this report talking about pink adrenaline and how pink adrenaline has these profound effects on animals. Through his research on pink adrenaline, which is just another term for adrenochrome, he actually discovers MAO, right? Monoamine oxidase. He discovers this, and that discovery gets him a Nobel Prize, and then it leads to the very first production of all the SSRIs that we know of, Lexapro, Prozac, a whole bunch of these others. It comes from this guy, Julius Axelrod.
My God.
And he only got into this line of research through his interest in pink adrenaline.
That's crazy. Wow. That's really interesting because, MAOI is tobacco and ayahuasca, the connection there. It was like 900 miles away, one tribe to the other, from where you get the MAOI to the ayahuasca
that
plant.
shook me to the nerve. Like, my hair's still standing
well
up.
I got another one too it doesn't come with a cool graphic with this guy in the black eye, but all of this research also into what do they give the kids that have ADHD? I forgot. Ritalin, but what's the other one? Adderall.
Adderall.
So
Ritalin,
this concept,
Ritalin.
Ritalin and Adderall, this research came from early amphetamine research, and they used to give kids just straight up amphetamine. And before they gave them amphetamine, they were giving school kids alcohol. They were literally getting kids drunk out of their mind. And then it slowly morphed into methamphetamine, and then methamphetamine turned into Adderall and Ritalin sort of derivatives. But it started with getting kids drunk off their ass, and I think it was like the 1910s or 20s.
What was the thing with so the Sandy Hook shooter? He had a thing with an antidepressant that he was taking that he stopped taking, and then it turned out that his mother, maybe this is false, but from what I remember, it turned out his mother was actually involved with that pharmaceutical company in the first place. Like, and they said that, if he had just been taking this medication, this wouldn't have happened. So it turned into like an advertisement for the medication rather than like being like, he was on this medication and it fucked him up. It was like, do you know what I'm talking about? There was like an antidepressant or some kind of med that he was supposed to be on. What was his name? The Sandy Hook shooter? I forget. Couldn't tie his shoes, but shot his class with an automatic weapon or something. I can't remember.
Adam Lanza.
Yeah, Adam Lanza.
Great. Now we've got all of the keywords we need to get banned.
I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Alex Jones lawsuit coming.
Oh my God. I just want to say I believe in Sandy Hook. I believe, and like believing is seeing.
I pray for the parents' losses of their children.
That's right. I'm with him.
Exactly. So one of these studies that I was mentioning, it's on one of them is the 1942 research paper called Alcoholism in Children. And what makes this extremely interesting is that the study, Alcoholism in Children from 42, was funded by the Committee on Research into Dementia Precox by the Supreme Council of the Scottish Rite.
I saw where you're
Really?
going there.
And in
Really?
this paper,
You started over
paper,
and I was like,
they
wait,
cite,
yeah,
look
what
at
do they
that
do?
on the first paragraph. They cite as early as 1600, artists depicted Bacchus as a drunken child. So in this research paper conducted by the Scottish Rite, it opens with talking about Bacchus as a drunken child. So I
Of
feel like
course it does.
they were looking into something way deeper than just like how this affects children's heads.
Wow. Well, this is cool because if you think about 40s and the DMT, was it LSD research being done by the AA founder, right? Because originally AA was really
Right.
interested in the higher power, like a higher realm of power.
Right. So that I watched that video of that housewife on LSD. You know, it's so classic. But that person facilitating that was the guy from AA, right? It was one of the two founding heads of the AA.
Right.
Not the OTO AA,
Well,
but the Alcoholics
nowadays,
Anonymous.
psychology, a lot of them are recommending like microdosing certain psychedelics to cure the more addicting dependencies such as alcohol. So is that essentially like one and the same?
Yeah, well, apparently he just found that LSD was helpful in breaking people from alcoholism.
Yeah, it
There's a
connects
lot of
to
the
brand new neural
conversation.
pathways.
It's all
So
about the idea of changing everything rather than medicating the situation. So instead of handing someone a CPAP machine or a crutch, especially a biodegradable crutch that's only good for a few years and there's no warranty, you know, this is something that you're supposed to change, and then afterwards you're not supposed to do it anymore. And so that's also confusing because our whole society is all about taking coffee every morning. So it's kind of confusing. You're like, well, maybe I should just take LSD every morning with my coffee. I mean, no.
That's what Marge Simpson did.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up because it's like you can only take so much LSD every day before you just can't, or you're in an insane asylum.
There's also a favorite quote of
Most don't use
mine.
that.
Before I ever did drugs, I remember hearing this quote and it very much bothering me. But it was that Ken Kesey said, you know, when you pick up the phone, you're supposed to listen, and once you've heard the message, you're supposed to hang up the phone.
Right.
And it just seems like kind of a bummer because you're like, oh, but I want to just keep hearing the message and learn. And it's like, no, dude, get out there and do the job.
Good analogy, Xirtus, and that it's if you then sacrifice getting the chase or the bridge over to that message, or the chase of wanting that message, pursuing it to get the drugs that way, and then losing the message entirely and losing yourself entirely to that then chase and loss of it. That's quite fascinating.
I think
I'm pretty sure Ken
various
Kesey
ways to
owned
do it.
Organics Annie's also, which was like,
Oh, really?
pretty brilliant way to make
I
some
didn't
money.
know that.
Between microdosing and experiencing the quote unquote bad trip, and then, you know, being ahead enough to control your journey and know where it's going, I think there's a lot of different aspects you can go after. If you're trying to use this as a tool to stop using the drug or to tell yourself to diet and exercise, you can reset the system and wind up exercising just off the willpower you gained from the knowledge of that one trip while you were focusing on that thing. But then you could microdose for, you know, 3 months and find that it improves your flow or some sort of thing that people figure out at
Your productivity.
Absolutely.
your productivity. Or you could be so unwound that you haven't dealt with the trauma, or you don't know how to unpack trauma and work with it or whatever, to where the experience can break you through, and then you think you're stuck there, or stuck with the trauma, stuck with the bad trip. The bad trip is now the contents of all life. Whereas if you have a really good trip, you're smiling for days and telling people, you know, you have really good energy or whatever, because you picked up a completely different thing from the message. I think that there's something valuable in hanging up the phone when you get the message, but I think we're all working with different messages and how it kind of works into our system. And some of us need to do it every year to be reminded, hey, asshole, come back to the ground, see the way things are. And some of us need to break out once a year to be like, I'm not stuck in this cubicle in this depressing life I've built for myself. I can will another creation and be part of that life, and things like that. I mean, there's so many possibilities, but when you think of it as just a a systematic process through which other handlers can change a person. You go into
Frank,
another.
that was beautiful, and I
Frank
think
always reminds me of,
everybody
like, Waking
should
Life.
have it once a year. Everybody should break out once a year. You know but that you choose. You know where that you are in that place in that year that you can place yourself to be there every year to do it and experience it and get that message. And the difference between microdosing and addiction, or like drug overdosing dependency, is that it's on the opposite end of the spectrum, and you just need a very small amount of that micro dosing to then consciously be able to project yourself over, instead of trying to depend on a drug and taking it in to
But it
get
depends on
over
why
it.
you take the drug. Like if you've gotten stuck on the drug because your friend took it and you couldn't find other drugs for a while or whatever, that's a completely different thing from if you buried the hooks of the trauma into the lower chakra stuff that everybody gets off by just scrolling social media or having lots of sex or whatever, but you don't find any of these outlets, and then this is your psychedelic experience. The hope is you'll crack into something psycho-spiritual or spiritual directly, and that will be this higher form of yourself, giving you an adult hand and saying, come, I kind of know the way, I kind of feel okay about this, let's go this way. But, you could have stuff still stuck from childhood to where every time you get in that position, you find yourself spiraling down. And that's a lot of just inner psychological work that needs to happen before the next time you attempt breaking through, because pretty soon you'll be breaking through and telling your friends about these huge, massive psychedelic changes, and they're looking at you like, didn't you just go from taking a lot of drugs to finding another drug that's doing pretty lights and making you feel cool?
Right.
There's so many aspects to it. I wouldn't.
And there's that
limit
whole being
anyone.
possessed thing that gets to me. Like the idea of, along the way, Thomas was talking about how alcoholism, and then was it not Baal? Who's the god? Bacchus?
Bacchus, yeah.
It's Bacchus. Bacchus, yeah, of course.
Honestly, Bacchus and Baal, you're very close. They could potentially be, because Baal Hammon was this god, this horned god of
Right.
agriculture, and
Well, Mithra
Bacchus was sort of a version
Bacchus was
of that.
Dionysus. So originally, he didn't have a place at the Mount Olympus, and Hestia, the goddess, had to go down to the human realm for some reason, and so when she got back, he jacked her spot. So he's back, took her spot, which is where the Vestal Virgin cult comes from. But she still has the fireplace, which is the deal with the fireplace is there. So that's part of the deal of burning things. And they have these Spanish and Greek and Cretan, they have these rituals where every year they burn a bunch of their stuff in the streets or at their fireplace, to like kind of a spring cleaning thing.
Like
It's
a Burning Man.
Yeah, like a Burning Man,
you
or like
take a
when your
psychedelic once a year
ex-girlfriend
to
burns all the
experience.
photos in the trash can. You know what I mean? Like that kind of a thing is
This is more like a cremation of care than you're describing.
very hestial. Exactly.
Yeah.
There's some variables in the whole thing if we're talking about microdosing and LSD or whatever, because apparently like a very large percentage of what people call LSD at this point is like research chemicals,
Yeah, like
like,
2CBs
that aren't
and stuff.
necessarily the thing in itself.
Oh,
So like for
TCI.
years I thought I was having like good acid when all I was having was like relatively decent acid, which is really
But
like
did it matter?
if you have LSD 25, you may have done acid 100 times and not realize like what acid really is.
Well, it's weird
like,
because again, calling it
Yeah,
acid,
yeah,
it
yeah.
probably is. It's not LSD.
acid,
LSD is a
right?
chemical.
It's a
Or
And I remember thinking this at festivals, like, why are they doing this? And then a friend of mine told me, who was in school, he said, well, it's a placebo effect, because they're going to a party, they're told they're going to have a good time, which is ambiguous, you know what I mean? And it's reinforced, which is supposed to be helpful while the thing is happening. And then everything's observed from some people that are completely sober or watching the entire festival right now. And
Operation
also,
Midnight Climax, shout out.
yeah,
Burning Man.
Midnight Climax is very much part of the renegade culture in
You've been to
California.
Burning Man, right?
Many times.
Yeah, right,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Do they have like public drug testing sites and?
I don't
Yeah.
know if they
Services
do.
there?
They do.
Yeah,
They do.
because
Yeah,
they
see,
also
that's the
have
thing, that's the
land
key.
and Bureau of Land Management will
At
come
the
around and mess with people.
responsible festivals where like Shambhalah's, where I've gone decades straight each year to do my once a year LSD experience, and it's like it's open enough, and for like safety even, they test all the drugs so that warnings go out. Anybody can bring their drugs to be tested,
Right, but they can't. They're not
there's
going to test for
fentanyl
what
in this,
the.
and then it's like,
Yeah,
okay, it's like the person that had it or brought it in.
There are government
ends up getting
agents.
charged
BLM
and
is all over Burning Man,
Or-
so you don't want to just be out and about with drugs. I don't think.
But you
it's
know,
even
They're
weed.
not, yeah, and they're not going to test
It's
your
personal
acid for
amount,
you.
so you
You
know
don't
that
cut.
your acid is pure acids. That your
There,
your
there's no
psychedelic
there.
is
You
not
can't
pure
cut acid with
psychedelic.
anything.
That's
That's
the whole
not a
point of
thing.
it.
So like you can
Yeah,
cut MDMA with things like there's no reason. The most you're going to have LSD cut with, or a research chemical calling itself LSD cut with, is going to be vodka. That's not the issue with
It's usually
LSD.
it's 2-5 or it's an NBM OMI with M-bomb, whatever, one of those kind of weird chemicals, or worse, like David Nichols' lab from Purdue, Indiana. I have a lot of problems with the kind of stuff that they do. They make drugs and then they say, oh, well, we're just designing them. We're not manufacturing them. But right afterwards, a bunch of them end up out there and people are purchasing them. And one of them was a Bromo Dragonfly.
I knew you were going to bring for Dragonfly.
Wow, you remember. That's crazy. Killed so many people. It's like, I don't mean to sound like anything other than horrified, because it gave people gangrene, right? Because they took it. Yeah, you take this like small amount of liquid powder or even such a small amount, and it would tense up the muscles, and it was killing people in Denmark and Sweden and the United States. And
dude,
yeah, horrible thing.
Is that what happened to Harvey Weinstein? So like, no, for real, because you guys know about this is so gross. I'm sorry, but like the Harvey Weinstein, like what was actually going on with that? Like, not only did like this is fucked up. Like certain things in the world are nuanced, whatever. This is so bad. Like, not only did he look like Jabba the Hutt, and that's probably the most offensive thing about it. Like, I made the same joke before Dave Chappelle said it about that situation, where I was like, well, I even used the same example. I was like, well, what if it was Brad Pitt? She'd be like, I got the part, it's all good. But he's so gross. He had a gangrene type issue with his dick. People when it's in the actual court documents, I guess, that women thought that he was trans when they first saw it. They couldn't tell. They were like, what is going on with you? So not only does he look like Jabba the Hutt, but he basically had like a Jabba the Hutt dick. I'm sorry to go there, but
so you're saying the carpet matches the drapes.
Oh yeah, exactly.
The first thing I think of is Dr. Money, right? Because Dr. Money, who performed their first transgender reassignment in the United States, right? Because he had a patient who had a botched circumcision.
Sorry, I just have to say quickly that I am ending this on my Bernays channel. I will keep it going on my Crypto Alchemist, but just in case, I don't want to lose both channels.
Too hot for Bernie.
Just definitely not hitting the apply for monetization on this one.
Very good. Well, no, it's an important story though, because David Reiner, right? You know the story. He had a botched circumcision, and it destroyed his life. This doctor said, "Well, there's not a lot of opportunity for a boy without a penis in this world," so they forced him to transgender reassign. So, in so many levels, on so many dimensions, it makes the transgender historicity more complex, because it started with this idea that there are two genders, and if you don't fit in one, you have to conform yourself to societal norms idea of gender. I mean, that's horrifying in and of itself, but worse than that is just the correlation between what's his name again, Weinstein.
Yeah, Harvey
Weinstein's deformed penis. It's totally possible that he had, I don't know, it's all speculation, but
it's not actually, because there's a whole.
Whether or not
there's
it was
actually
a botched circumcision. I mean, but yeah,
that. Yeah. I'm gonna say they were showing pictures in the court. Like, this is a whole thing anyway. Whatever.
No, that part's for sure objective.
Are there pictures online of this? I feel like it's
no.
I've seen faces
well, there might be, but I'm not going to the dark web.
Looked for him, you know what I mean?
For that,
I don't even go.
He called those big
fast material. Oh, I'm sorry. Am I too loud? I probably am. Going to the mic.
Speaking of which, limb regeneration. Stefan asked earlier if you could do this, and you can. They're in the process of making technology that you can actually grow new limbs. They think the step might have to do with bioelectricity and also adenovirals. This Chinese scientist used stem cell technology to grow antlers on mice. So I mean, that's horrifying. I don't know if I have to go that
Antlers
way.
on mice. Wasn't that in Scrooged? No, something like no. There was. Oh, we tried using glue, and he was like, "Well, did you try staples?"
God.
Sorry.
But yeah, they're in the process of biohybrid devices to restore functions in paralyzed limbs. This could be interesting because in the process of growing new limbs that aren't connected properly, you could then connect them through wireless biohybrid devices instead of your normal nervous system. So you'd have a body that basically replaced the central nervous system. I think that's interesting. I mean, it's also that's along the way, right? The first step is you just deal with quadriplegic people and paraplegic people. You give them the opportunity to move their limbs again with biohybrid devices. But
no, if you can get people to be able to, like, say, walk with a phantom limb, like leg, like if they can use the phantom limb in such a way, like that's pretty awesome.
Well, and dude, this phantom limb concept too is one of the most interesting things that has come across my purview in the last year, just because Descartes used this as his way of determining where the soul rests in the body.
Right, which is the basis
of the pineal gland. Because he said that he was basically describing a blind man can take a cane and tap the ground, and the same way that the cane vibrates and makes its way all the way up to the pineal gland, and then that was his thesis was that the soul can no more live in that wooden stick of your cane than it could in your arm or anywhere else in your body. And that's why it had to live in the pineal gland, because it had to be in this epicenter of everything.
What you just said was actually almost verbatim how that was explained to me in massage school. So like we spent like a full day just on phantom limb information, everything there is to know about fucking phantom limb stuff as best they could, that's basically the thing. So in our medical terminology, when we say inferior or superior in relationship to where are we talking about on the body, it's all in relationship to the pineal gland because of Descartes. It's pretty crazy, right?
Man, the entire idea of regenerating the body, though, because at a certain point you could grow a ship of Theseus. You could grow a completely new body, and you could transplant it with biohybrid devices over to the next body, and then maybe keep your brain in a box or something like that until you digitize all the information.
Someone was talking about that earlier in the comments. They were saying that, like, could you regrow eyes or something? What were they?
Stefan was talking about, can you regrow limbs or something? And that in the last week, there's been a lot of work actually that's been moving towards regrow limbs. There it was. I saw, the Chinese scientists with what's it called? They implanted some sort of a Betimus cell or something like that. The Blastemus cell. The Blastemus. They Blastema cells they implanted into the mouse, allowing the mouse to grow antlers.
Dude, the next generation of sea monkeys is going to be wild.
Right? That's the thing, because I keep imagining, like, what about a cooler country? I'm sorry, a country with less oversight, a worse country, whatever you say, a little more,
maybe one with wet markets,
a more classically liberal country. Let's be honest, you know what I mean? Where you can buy a mouse that has antlers. I can't wait to see. Remember when the Chinese had a fish GMO like pet? Like all these weird pet.
Well, I thought for a while everything was going to get glow in the dark, right? Everyone was going to have a glow in the dark cat and a glow in the dark dog, and it was because they were extracting some kind of
dog. That would be a dope, but I guess I already do because he's got like a giant LED rechargeable.
The problem is that technology moved to Silicon Valley, and I take some personal sadness to this. I mean, so I was like, we'll have silicon trees that are glass and they'll fiber optics, and they'll be able to make more oxygen than anything else, and we'll have brighter colors than nature could ever produce. And all these hippies were like, no, I want to wear a cardigan. I want it to be hemp, And that was the end. It feels like after the iMac by the iPod, they stripped it of all the synthetic color and the pride you'd have on the inside of it.
And then they killed Flash, those assholes.
Oh my God.
Not for them though. That's what I'm saying.
So we live in this world that's sustained kind of the way like a homeowners association sustains a community. They're like, you can't have a GMO dog that glows in the dark.
No, but they always like we get our toys, man. But like, I don't know if I would go so far. Like, I don't know what you think about this, Thomas. But like the idea that people say that the CIA is always 30 years ahead of whatever the average people are having, like that, and usually examples that are given, classic examples like the dragonfly with the camera, you know what I mean? Like we know, like the heart attack gun, what the fuck technology has gone on with the heart attack gun at this point? Like we know it worked then. That's pretty basic. Like I feel like I could make one, Like it's like what they passed around seems pretty, like I don't know. What do you think? Do you think it's 30 years? You think it's 10? Do you think it's
I think we've got what years
not?
again? 2023. We got like 4 or 5 years. We got like 2 years till it matters, and then 4 to 5 years until it's completed. Probably, I think 2029 is when the eclipse point is. Right. That's what 2029 is going to be wild. I'm pretty.
And I think in the 50s it might have been 30 years, and then by the 80s it might have been 10 years, and now it's like maybe
I
they've
see.
got a few years ahead.
That's
I mean,
okay.
I think that
Gotcha.
the thing is, what you have is you have multiple places. It used to be that Minnesota was probably 20 years behind the fashion of, New York City, and then it was 10 years, and then it was a year, and now they have Netflix at the same time in Swahili and in English and in French. So everyone's watching the show Rick and Morty at the exact same time, and that's changed everything. Now that
That's a great point.
There's some people that are on a level that is the contemporaneous culture. And there are other people that are living because they have to in these sustained classic zoos, right? Where they're saying, okay, you have to work all day because we need that to exist still. But that won't exist probably in the next few years. I think we're very close to the end of that, right? They don't need any of it. They just need automation to bring boats back and forth of supplies.
Right. I feel like that was like an Andrew Yang comment or something right there.
Dude, I don't know. Like Yang is. I don't want to.
Were you Yang Gang? I feel like we got Yang Gang in the chat right now.
I was like Yang adjacent. I'm Yang Gang adjacent. I'm kind of like
alt Yang.
Like, come on.
The only thing was he was the only guy talking about that. He was the only one there talking about it. So it's like, that's something that needs to be talked about. You're like, well, as a candidate, you got something really good going for you. You're willing to discuss the thing
that
that's
needs
like
to be
the
talked
elephant
about
in the
that
room.
nobody will talk about. Right.
And then he ate the whipped cream from that dude's crotch, and then it was all over.
Actually, when he cried about gun control, I think when he did this fake tear thing and on his during the debate, he's like, I get guns in schools. Like, honestly, that was the end. Oh, you're right. The whipped cream thing. No, that was it. No, I'm okay with this. I'm all right with that. That's a meme right there waiting to happen. I'm gonna save my rant on Yang Gang until next time because I want a Taiwanese man in the house, and Eddie had to depart early. But let me also just pull up some of your guys' stuff. Synchronous is Eddie's work. We're gonna go back to that next time because he had some more interesting syncs I wanted to pull up. But he has to do important stuff, which if you can't watch him here, you might have to watch primetime regular television because apparently that's what he had to go work on right now. So make sure you go to the Synchronous Facebook group if you use Facebook. Otherwise, on Twitter, Synchronous, and you can follow Eddie's stuff. Make sure you go to Paranoid American, the best comic book publisher in the world, and. Yeah, it's amazing. You can also.
And I'm trying to build up my Twitter too. Like Eddie was saying earlier, I'm trying to figure out what each of my social media is going to be. So my Twitter account, which is just Paranoid America, because there's not enough room for the N anymore. It's going to just be all conspiracy facts. I'm trying to do at least 5 or 6 a week, and then I'm also doing just balls to the wall adrenochrome research. I'm probably going to be plastering it all over Twitter because if I just use the word adrenochrome on Instagram, it just gets ratioed immediately.
Oh man.
I like Paranoid America. I think that sounds good, actually. That's got a nice ring.
It's kind of like it's a relationship between the two. But come on, you got to be following Paranoid America.
And we were just talking about Ghost Army related stuff today, and this is where the U.S. used inflatable tanks, which kind of was derived from those earlier versions.
I'm curious if I told you this at some point, Thomas, but I have a theory that the Black Sabbath album, Paranoid, is actually like entirely like a concept album about Helter Skelter, like all the way through. Like
I haven't heard this, and I already
War was carved into the chest, Pig was written on the wall. Like so there's a quote about paranoia from Manson. There's a whole thing there, but anyway, I thought if somebody would probably know about that, it would be you. But yeah.
Also, make sure you all watch Conspiracy of Silence, a very important documentary on the Boys Town molestation suit that the Republican what was he singer was like a young
he sang at the Republican National Convention, and he also hosted the after party with Maureen Reagan. So there's pictures of him chilling with Maureen Reagan and all of these other people at the party. Like,
but if you're ever curious about like the Midwestern, if you're ever interested about like the Midwestern orphans that were taken to Boys Town, and there's a lot of videos I used to watch films from the 30s that talk about, Boys Town and how the Catholic Church and Hollywood worked together to build up Boys Town. But you've got these corporate fat cats from Nebraska that are raping ritualistically children, and
Alan Baer, Craig Spence,
stories allegedly, and then a lot of the kids
in Minecraft.
A lot of the kids, America's a beautiful country. We're innocent until proven guilty. And so apparently all of these kids, all of them unanimously told these lies, right? And so they were arrested and they were put in the longest periods of solitary confinement in the United States history for trying to come out against these people they called pedophiles, which were probably just, taxpaying American businessmen, right?
Are you going to destroy Mickey Rooney for me the way that Mickey Rooney destroyed Breakfast at Tiffany's?
I will destroy Mickey Rooney for you only by saying, watch him do the Big Apple. Have you ever seen him dance when he was young? Mickey Rooney was so amazing. Here's the Big Apple.
Oh my God.
And Black Stallion too, which I have a sync for. But
God, he was so good. Look at, but he's just a little man. He makes Danny DeVito seem like a giant.
Didn't he do like a blackface thing in Boys Town? Wasn't there some controversy? Like it was like Newt Gingrich or somebody was like, "Well, we need more things like Boys Town," and he started talking about the movie, and then it was like, dude. When's the last time you saw that, man? Jesus Christ.
Dude, digital blackface, they're so behind the times because digital blackface, you have to actually deep fake yourself like I've done. Type in Xirtus Afro on your GIF search and you'll find it. So that's years old. It's like Muhammad in South Park. But okay, Paranoid American, make sure you go to the link pop because you can also find all of his links to other things here. And make sure you're supporting his newest project. I don't know if you've not, where do I go? ParanoidAmerican.com. The Chosen One, is it the Kickstarter? Yeah, guys, all you have to do is notify. Is this the one?
That's the one. Yeah, we just hit 10 followers.
That's the one.
Guys, notify me on launch. Make sure that you're set up on this. It does not cost you any money to get notified, and then that's how it's going to get published. So if you can't wait for the sequel, it's time. Make sure you're doing that. Amazing. And then also go to thesyncbook.com so you can find David's videos, which are. Did I go past them? I'll go to videos. Boom, Syncflix. Right here. And you've got all kinds of research into synchromysticism. He did the Jodorowsky Light of the Rainbow with a designer.
The Rainbow Thief. Yeah, I'm working on two simultaneously, right? I'm juggling between two sync films I'm really excited about. One was the one I was talking about with Lana Del Rey's new album. And another one is another Aldous Harding album besides designer. But yeah, this over 200 films for streaming and download for free. You can cast them. They don't seem to work well on iPhones for a lot of people. We talked about that before, but for all in all, they're functional.
If you want to watch Roman Polanski's Bitter Moon, you better do it with Lana Del Rey Sync to It by David Plate. That's the way to go. Good movie.
Yeah. If somebody watches any of these films, please send me a message on Twitter and tell me about your experience, because when people do that anyway, I just enjoy it so much. So even if you have something bad to say, I would actually like that rather than no message.
Like a book club, a movie club nights,
Dude.
Like everybody watch it the night before.
We've been meaning to schedule that. We got to do that on
together, and then go on YouTube and talk about it.
So I was thinking about that because the Discord would be an easy place to set up. Like we put a movie up every night or every week or something, and we review it somehow in the audience. If you guys take the time, watch these, and we can talk about it more. But definitely send David some messages about your feelings and what you went through watching some of these things, because they're amazing. And a lot of the time, it'll help you open up thoughts you've had or haven't had, and help you process thoughts. And it breaks down the control, because the film is controlled by its soundtrack. So you can free the film by doing this.
The soundtrack always controls the film.
David made a great point last time he was on here too, is that you put one of these on in the back of a party that's going on, and all of a sudden you've got this awesome talk piece that lets everyone at the party connect to each other by talking about this central thing, and you don't really have to pay attention to the movie because it's just music with visuals. So it's such a great concept.
That is. My girlfriend would love that too. I like that.
Also, make sure you check out Bernays Crypto Alchemist.
So before you show me Paranoid American, Thomas and I, we got an episode coming up on the 30th in 2 days' time.
Oh, yeah.
We're going to be doing a deep diving. And Thomas, are you live on your channel right now? Are you doing the multicasting? And if not, why not?
I don't even have. I have a channel on YouTube, but dude, I try my best to put videos on it. I haven't done a single actual show.
All you got to do now, from this point forward, it says share with your audience, a button in the top right corner right now. Next time, you just click on that, and it will automatically hook up to your channel and go live on it. So
we'll premiere next.
With Xirtus, you got to start getting content.
When we do
Wait a minute, that wasn't the real Isaac Weishaupt, was it?
Yeah.
Was why am I thinking? I'm thinking of the head of the Illuminati from the
Like you're
late
talking
1700s.
of Adam Weishaupt, which is where
Adam
he
Weishaupt.
derived
So
his
is he
name from,
related
yeah.
to him for real?
No. Isaac Weishaupt. That's not his real name.
Not his real
He's
name.
an
Okay,
OG
that's what I was
conspiracy
asking.
theorist.
Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
The Illuminati head, wasn't it?
I like
Good
the
name.
idea that you were interviewing a distant relative of Adam Weishaupt. But never mind.
Ian Crossland used to interview the great grandson of Joseph Mengele. There's some weird people out there on the internet, but Vel, guys, I appreciate it. Well, Crypto Alchemist, right? He almost got me to forget. Crypto Alchemist, make sure to cryptoalchemist.com. YouTube/Crypto Alchemist. But you get the point. Make sure you go there and you subscribe and watch all the videos. We love you so much. Thank you all for being here.
One love.
Peace.
Hello. Welcome to the Xirtus.
Wait. I totally forgot about Frank
Oh,
Zero.
dear.
Frank Zero, guys.
Oh my God.
Psyched you out.
Atta
Okay.
boy.
Frank Zero, he left early
Yeah,
because he had to do some stuff. But
Frank.
go to Frank Zero. Go to Alien in My Window
And Eddie.
blogspot.com. No,
But
I went
Frank.
to Synchronous. I did that. But yeah, make sure you check out Alien in My Window and the Frank Zero Instagram. Okay, I feel better now. Love you all. Bye.
Hello. Welcome to the Xirtus.
What's going on? It cut out again, and those asking for a encore. I'm gonna be going live in an hour. I don't know what's going on, Xirtus. I didn't stop that. You're still live. Let's hit another one.
The following